It's been a while and a lot of things have happened and changed. We're gonna get to all of that. But before we get started, I have to address the big ladder in the room. Yes, we are doing renovations right now in our house, so sorry about the distracting ladder behind me. Hopefully it will be gone next time and this room will probably look a lot different. Well, where do I begin? I just have this list of, all kinds of notes, and I just found out last night that my husband was going to be in the office today. So I knew that today was the day I was going to make this video so that I could have the house to myself. It's quiet. I can use the office. The setup is better in here. I don't have any distractions from my thoughts, so hopefully things flow a little bit better. But I just decided last night I was gonna do this today, and honestly I've not really gone through my notes, so we'll see what happens. I decided I want to start out with the most recent thing I wanted to share and kind of work our way back. Okay, so this last weekend we had our stake women's conference and it was amazing. But I just have to tell you, I had been invited to help make the lunches that morning. So we got there at 8:30 in the morning. It was a really crazy snowy day. Snow like we haven't had in a long time. I get to the church and I start helping in the kitchen. We have to make 300 lunches for women in 2 different buildings. And we had an hour and a half to do this before the women's conference started. Wow, about 10 minutes to the time when women's conference was supposed to start, we realized that just wasn't gonna happen. We were gonna need to make the lunches through conference. So we went over and we turned on the speakers so that we could hear it playing in the kitchen. They announced that there were some technical difficulties and a lot of people trying to watch from home weren't able to see anything. So they said that they were going to just record it and send out a link later so everyone could watch it. And I thought, yes, that way if I'm distracted back here in the kitchen and I miss out, I can watch it later and I can even share it here. Come to find out, that didn't happen. When it was all said and done, the technical guy came over and talked to us and said, I wasn't able to record it. We just didn't have enough storage and space, so I couldn't do it. And a lot of ladies were bummed because they missed it. I got to go sit down and listen halfway through Sister Marriott's talk, so I only heard what she said and the closing remarks of the stake president, but everything prior to that I didn't get to hear because things were just so crazy in the kitchen. So that's what I want to share with you, and everything happens for a reason, and so I feel like what I was able to hear was probably the most important part that I share in today's video message. Okay, so if you know Sister Marriott, she is this incredible lady. She has this southern accent. She's from Louisiana. She has a Methodist background. And so I love her perspective. I love the way she tells stories. I somehow always connect with her and resonate with what she's sharing. And she does it in a way where she adds humor, but yet the spirit is so strong. She just has this talent for that. And I love humor. I love to laugh, but I also love to feel the spirit. So that's why I love Sister Marriott. I used to call her our Latter-day Saint Paula Deen. Anyways, when I sat down, the first thing I heard her say was, when y'all get home today, say a little prayer and invite Jesus into your heart and into your life. She said, I promise you, if you do this, it's powerful. It will change your life and it will get you through these hard times. Well, you know what that reminded me of? It reminded me of all the many videos I've seen over the years of people from other faiths and churches. I'm sure you've seen them too. And they always say at the end of their messages, invite Jesus into your heart, invite Jesus into your life. And they always offer that invitation, or they'll even have people come up to the front of the room and say, come up and invite Jesus into your heart and into your life, which they often refer to as come get saved. But you know what? It's so true, because if Jesus really is our Savior and we're going through these crazy hard times right now, don't we want Him there with us, going through it with us, being our hero? Just like in the movies, you always want that hero with you to protect you and save you from all the destruction and chaos. Well, we have that. We have that in our Savior, Jesus Christ. And so that's what Sister Marriott was trying to say. She was saying, before I even get into what I'm about to tell you, you need to do that first. You need to take that step and actually say out loud with your voice, Jesus, I invite you into my heart and I invite you into my life. And when you do that, he comes. Isn't it crazy to think that you could be going your whole life doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing, going to church, reading your scriptures, raising your family, but if you haven't actually invited Jesus to come into your life, then you might feel like, I've been doing everything I'm supposed to my whole life, but where are you, God? I don't feel you. I don't know that you're really there. So it's a proactive approach that we have to take to actually invite him in, actually say those words out loud. It reminds me of that picture of him knocking at the door. He's there, but we have to turn the handle and open the door and invite him in. So I loved that. But this invitation to invite Christ into your life also takes place every time we renew our baptismal covenant when we take the sacrament. So every Sunday as we do this, we're being promised to always have his Spirit to be with us. So I love that because as long as we're taking the sacrament and keeping our covenant and renewing it, then we're having that promise of always being able to feel him with us and in our life. All right, so she then went on to share this amazing story. She said there was this time in her life when she and her husband had a business and they needed to take out this huge loan. They took out a good faith loan, putting their faith in their stock, so in the stock market. They put their faith into their stock, believing that it would do really well, and that's what they would use to pay off the loan. Well, things didn't exactly go as according to plan. And suddenly the stock started doing really terrible. And they realized that the date was coming up to where they needed to pay off this loan and they couldn't do it. There was no way they were going to be able to pay off this loan. She said there was a 6-month period and the deadline was that coming February. One day it just hit her and she and her husband realized we're going to lose everything. We're going to lose our house. We're going to lose our cars. We're not going to have anything. And she said it just filled her with this great amount of anxiety like she'd never had before. She was shaking and crying and super stressed out about it. So she decided to try to go find peace in the temple. So she took the time to go to the temple and she decided she was going to go into the initiatory room because she said at least in that room you don't have people walking up to you asking you if you're okay if they see you crying. She said it's just you and one other person and so it's okay. So she said she went in to do that. She went in to do those ordinances and all of a sudden the emotions just started coming out. While she was sitting there waiting on the bench, she just started to sob and cry. And at first, she said her prayer was to the Lord, Lord, don't do this to me. Help me, Lord. Don't let us lose our house. Don't let us lose everything. We've worked so hard. What will everyone think about us? What will they say about us? They're probably going to think we don't know how to manage our money very well. Oh, I can't even imagine what they're going to say about us. And as she went on and on and on, suddenly the Lord stopped her and showed her that she was looking at things wrong. She was praying about it wrong. She was praying about it coming from a place of pride. She was worried about what people were going to think about her and what they were going to say. And she said, in that moment, the Lord called out my sin and I stopped and I repented. And she said, when I did that, when I finally realized I had a pride problem and I let down my pride, gave it over to the Lord and said, you know what, Lord, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Forget about what I just said that I want. What I really want is what you want because I trust you and I trust that what you want for me is the best outcome for me. You know everything and I don't. She said when she said that, she felt these iron bands break off of her and she just felt all this pressure release. And all of a sudden she felt like she was floating on a cloud. And she said she knew that was the Lord taking that burden from her and carrying her along with that burden. And she said, you know what, Lord, I don't care if we end up in a teeny tiny apartment. She's like, but remember, we do have 11 kids. But she said, whatever happens, I know I'll be happy because it's what you want for me. And I know it will be the best thing for our family. And so I'm excited about that. And I find peace in that. and that's all I want. Well, she said she went home that day. She was a completely different person. She started to see things through a completely different perspective, through the Lord's eyes. And that started to rub off on her husband, and it started to cheer him up. And when she came home that day, she said, you know what, honey? Everything's gonna be okay. It's all gonna be just fine. And she would tell him that every day. And as they would get closer to that deadline and see that the stocks were still going down, he sometimes would stop at the door before he'd leave the house, and he'd say to her, say it to me again. And she'd say, everything is gonna be just fine. It really is. And then he'd leave. Wow. She said it got down to the very wire when that loan needed to be paid off, and they were willing to accept whatever was going to happen. They weren't stressing about it. They had peace. And suddenly, in that final moment, all of a sudden, the stock market changed, and those stocks went up just enough that they had enough money to pay off the loan, and it all worked out. And she said, you know what? I knew it would all work out. No matter what the Lord had planned for us, it was going to be just fine. And so instead of stressing about it and worrying about it during that 6-month window to the deadline, we chose to live every day joyfully and happy. She said every day during that whole 6-month period, I felt like I was floating on a cloud, and I felt so light and so happy, and everything was so positive and wonderful, and things made me laugh and smile, and there just wasn't 1 ounce of negativity about any of it, no stress whatsoever. And she gave us this message that because of the Lord and what He has done for us, we can be joyful about things that we don't have control over. Isn't that a message that we all need to be hearing right now? Absolutely. Now, she was a witness to exactly what I had been feeling and writing down in my notes. I had been telling myself over the previous few weeks, you know what? I'm only going to focus on the things that I have control over. Those are the things that I'm going to give my time and attention to. I don't have control over what's happening in the world. I don't have control over what's happening in the White House and with politics. I don't have control over any of that. But what I do have control over is my attitude and keeping my house clean and things like family history and making delicious meals for my family and coming up with fun things for my kids to do. Those are things that I do have control over. And as I made that choice to start putting a focus on those things and putting all of my time into that, I felt exactly what she was talking about. I felt these iron bands start to bust off of me, and I felt like, oh my gosh, I can do this. We can do this. We can get through this. Everything's going to be okay. So that's today's message. We're going to get to all the stuff that a lot of you have been asking me about and messaging me about, but I'd like to get to those things coming from this perspective. So I wanted to kind of put that out there to help pull you into that frame of mind so that as we address those things, we can do so without stress and anxiety, and we can feel peace. It's possible. Okay, so then the state president got on and he said, you know what? I don't know how you follow that, which they always say, but he started out by encouraging all the sisters in our state to engage in a 7-day gospel experience. He said, your gospel experience shouldn't just be on Sundays, and it shouldn't just be here and there. If someone sends you a video to watch, or you're waiting in your car, so you flip through some scriptures, you know. He said, no, it should be something every single day, because if you're filling your cup every single day with the light of Christ and the Word of God, you will be strengthened against all that's coming, and you will have that peace. Because think about it, if every day you're engaging in the gospel, you're filling yourself with truth, with the Word of God, with His light, with things that edify you and lift you up, things that give you hope and build your faith. And if you're doing that every single day, it's like building this mighty fortress around your home and your family. Nothing's going to be able to penetrate through that. You're going to be able to withstand the fiery darts of the enemy. And oh, they're going to keep coming. He said, here's the best way to gauge this all. Every day of your life, ask yourself when you're about to participate in something, respond to something, watch something, whatever it is, he says, ask yourself, is this going to edify me and build me up and strengthen my fortress? Because if it's not, I don't want anything to do with it and just toss it away. Only engage in things that are going to build your faith and lift you up. He said, every day, look for the light. When everything around you seems dark and foggy, always look for the light and go towards that light till it gets brighter and brighter and brighter and moves out all that darkness. Because it's the light that chases the darkness away. And we know this, right? We know this, but sometimes we need to be reminded daily. I know I do. Now again, before I went to women's conference and heard these messages, this is what the Spirit was already speaking to my heart. This is what I had been writing down in my notes and what I had been doing every day. And it started out with just little things. As I go back in my mind and I remember that day this year, there was a day when things just felt so bleak, so overwhelming, so unimaginable. I didn't even know how to cope with it. There was a day when I just drove out to the park out west of here, and that's what I do when I need a moment, and I just parked as the sun was setting over the lake, and I tried to process all my thoughts and feelings and emotions, and I wrote it down, I cried it out, I listened to music, I sang along to the words, and I had a little therapy moment and a little session with God right there in my car. Sometimes you have to do that, and my husband knows when I'm doing that because we have an app that's synced to our car, and it shows you where the car is, and so if I'm gone for a long time and my husband wonders, where did she go? He can just look on the app and see where my car's at. And he saw me at this park and he called me and he said, what are you doing? Where are you? And I said, I'm having a moment. That's all I needed to say. He said, okay, take as long as you need. And I did. And we need that sometimes. So that's where it started. After I did that, it just slowly got better and better every day, just a little bit at a time. I'm talking about little things. Like there was a night when I'm like, I just need to soak it all out. I'm gonna take a bubble bath and I'm going to listen to really good songs that I really like, that really speak to me right now, messages that I need to hear that will help me feel better. And I made myself this delicious sugar-free drink, put some ice in it, filled up the bubble bath, locked the bedroom door, and spent an hour in there just watching these music videos and sipping my drink and just soaking and just floating in that water and feeling so light. Again, after that, I felt just a little bit better than before. And it just builds over time. You just keep doing this. Every day you find these little things to do that are going to help you feel just a little bit better than you did before. So that every day becomes just a little bit better than it was the day before. And you just keep telling yourself that and believing that and hoping for that and wanting that. And as I did this, I'd turn on the radio out of habit in the morning and they'd start talking about all these terrible, horrible things. And I'd think, whoa. Is this going to edify me right now? I don't think it is. So I turned it off. And then I turned on something else that was going to build me up and strengthen me. Because in those moments when we're doing things that we have power over and control over, things that we can plan for ourselves, things that we can do to better our lives and better the lives of our kids, our families, our home, our neighbors, those are the things that are going to make a difference. Those are the things that are going to bring us joy and happiness, which is going to help build our hope and keep us in that place of, you know what, everything's going to be just fine. Today was just fine. I made it through the day. Nothing terrible happened. The sky hasn't fallen yet. I can still go to the store and get groceries. I can still use the phone to call my family. I can still listen to good music. There's something delicious baking in the oven, right? When we focus on what we have and we appreciate that every single day, we feel better. Now there's something more I want to share about this, but I've decided to save that for the end of the video when I sum this all up. So stay with me. Okay, so let's talk about some of the events that have happened over the last few weeks since my last video message. I've had a lot of questions coming in, and in fact, I decided to kind of add something new towards the end of the video. I'm going to read some of the questions that people have been asking me, because a lot of the questions I've been getting asked more than once by different people. So I thought I would save a space for the end of the video where I can read your questions and we can go through them together. Now I want to say, normally in these videos when I talk about current events, I talk about things going on in the world and in the news and all of that, but for the sake of today's video, I'm only going to bring up a few of those things. I am going to talk about events, but not in the way that you think. So let's start with the biggest one, Inauguration Day. I didn't watch it, maybe some of you did, but I woke up that morning and I thought, you know what? I only want to do things today that are going to make me feel happy and excited and hopeful. I don't know that watching the inauguration is going to make me feel that way. So I'm just not even going to bother. And I didn't. But later, as the texts and emails started coming in with the pictures of the different women wearing red and purple and pointing out, you know, the similarities with the woman in the book of Revelation who rides the beast, and she's dressed in red and purple and is decked out in pearls and gold and jewelry. And people were showing these pictures and saying, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And I thought to myself, yeah, we know that we're living in that day. We're here. It's happening. But what good does it do to spread that message and to spend so much time looking for symbols and reading into this and dissecting it and breaking it down and analyzing it and having conversations back and forth about it? Again, it's something you don't have control over. It's not going to edify you. It's not going to edify others. So take it and toss it. But it was no surprise to me when I saw Kamala wearing purple. I'd noted this before at past elections that a lot of times the candidates, whether they win or lose, will wear purple. Here's some screenshots right here. Here's Hillary Clinton. Purple symbolizes red and blue coming together. When you mix red and blue, you get purple. So you'll often see people wearing these three colors, red, blue, and purple. Red, white, and blue, of course, are patriotic. It makes sense. But purple represents mixing those colors together, unity of both parties. This is nothing new. This is no surprise. This is something people have done all through the decades. I've noticed this before, and I've talked about it before with my friends. So it wasn't a surprise to me. It didn't stand out to me when I saw people wearing red and purple. Had it been all together in one outfit, maybe so. We've talked about that before. Then there was a picture going around about Lady Gaga and her giant bird that she was wearing, that brooch, and how there was this connection to the Hunger Games. I'm not a Hunger Games fan, so I had to go research some of that. But I did see the very first movie because my husband rented it. I had no idea what it was. I hadn't read the books. And I decided after that first movie, I wasn't a fan. And I never watched anymore. But I remember when I saw that character that people are comparing Lady Gaga to, I remember thinking, wow, she reminds me of Lady Gaga. They look alike. I wonder who has influenced who. Was Lady Gaga influenced by the book? Or did the people who produced the movie, were they inspired by Lady Gaga? But I could see her having this role. I remember thinking that years ago. So when people made that connection, I thought that's funny because I've thought that before. But when I saw that bird, to me, right away, it looked like a dove carrying an olive branch, which represents peace. It was huge and ginormous and definitely something you wouldn't have missed. Which I think was intentional. That was the plan. But a lot of people were saying it reminded them of the mockingbird. And here's the screenshot that was going around. So when I first saw that screenshot, I thought, whoa, if that's true, then yes, I would say she's sending a message. But I decided to go see if I could find that picture myself. I don't always have time to do this, but I've talked about this in past videos where there have been things going around before, and when I took the time to look into it, I was surprised when I found out it wasn't legit. So I did a search for scenes of this character in this movie, and I pulled up all these images, and as I started combing through them, I found this image. Here it is, and I noticed that it had been photoshopped. That's not what she was wearing. She didn't have the bird or the black top. It just simply was a red dress. Someone had doctored that and photoshopped that to convince everyone that that's what this was. That's what was going on here. That's where Lady Gaga was inspired, and this was the message she was trying to send. And they were all in on this. don't feel bad if you fell for it. I know a lot of people did. Here's the two birds side by side. You can see the one on the left clearly is a dove. It's not meant to be the bird from the book. You can see here's the cover of the book. The birds look completely different. Look at the tail, look at the wings. On the right, this one points up. On the left, they point down. On the right, the tail looks like a mermaid. On the left, the tail is found on an angle. So clearly not the same birds. The intention of wearing this dove was to symbolize peace and unity. But what I'm trying to say is initially from the beginning, when those rumors started swirling and the pictures were coming in, I didn't feel alarmed about it. It wasn't something that I felt like we needed to really feed into and read into and spend a lot of time on. I didn't get that feeling from the spirit. And then come to find out when I decided to look into it finally, it wasn't legit. But you see how the adversary tries to do that? He tries to take things that he knows will trigger us, especially in regards to things that we already have our guard up on, things that we're already touchy about, that we get bad vibes about. He'll take those things and try to take it to another level. And then he plays off of our shock and our fear to spread that message, which actually strengthens and gives power to his armies. That's something we don't want to be doing right now. We don't want to be giving time and attention and therefore strength and power to his armies. We're going to talk about that at the end of the video. Okay, so here's a little event that happened in my life. I don't know that you could call it an event, more like something to pay attention to. So after my last video message, I was out on a walk with my dog. We were at the park and all of a sudden he goes running over to this thing. I had no idea what it was. I thought it was like a piece of black plastic or something. And I noticed him sniffing it and trying to touch it. So I go running over and that's when I notice, here's a screenshot, it's a dead crow. And it wasn't there the day before. We go there every day. I'd never seen it before. There it was. And I pulled him back and said, no, 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 no. Tried to keep him away from it. And the next day we go back and it's still there. And we go back a third day and this time it had been moved. It was next to a bush on the walking trail. And then the day after that, I noticed there was a second one next to this other dead crow. There were now 2 dead crows next to this bush. And that really stood out to me because it's something I don't see all the time. And there was a pattern. There started with 1, now there was 2. So I made a mental note of it and thought, well, if there's more to this, I'm sure it will come. Right when I said that, I looked at my video on my phone and it was 1 minute and 44 seconds into this recording. And I was texting back and forth with a friend about this the next day. And all of a sudden, I'm on my walk with my dog again, and right as I'm texting her about this, and we're going back and forth, I hear a bird calling, and I look up, and look, there's another one of these birds on top of this house, looking down at me, calling out to me. There was nobody else on the street, just me and my dog. Well, not too long after this happened, a friend of mine sent me this article right here. Tower of London's Queen Raven Merlina missing. And I saw the number 23, I circled it right there. It reminds me of the 23rd hour of the day or the 11th hour, which is a pay attention number for me. What is it with these blackbirds, right? Ravens and crows? Well, in case you want to know the difference between a raven and a crow, crows travel in large groups of birds. So whenever you see all these blackbirds in a cornfield or after someone has harvested their wheat field, you'll know that those are crows. But ravens travel together in pairs of 2. They look very similar. Ravens are actually larger than crows. So you tell me from this picture, am I looking at a raven or a crow? Well, with this article that my friend sent me, these had to do with ravens. And where there were 2 of them that were dead on my walk, I'm now assuming that those were a pair. Here's the best way to tell the difference. Crow's beaks are slimmer and straighter, as you can see right here, and raven's beaks are bigger and curvier. They also seem to have different kinds of feathers. The raven looks more feathery around its head, where the crow looks more slick and smooth. Now this beak looks pretty slim and straight to me, but the feathers around the head are really fluffy. And the thing is if you realize when you're looking at this picture at the angle, this is the bottom of the beak, so you can't even see the top. The way that the head is turned and the way that I took the picture, you're looking directly underneath the bottom of the beak. So it's very possible that the top of the beak is curved. I thought about going back to look, but there's snow covering it right now, and I'm not gonna go do that. But I will say the bird that was on top of the house, I went and listened to the different calls that crows and ravens make, and it definitely sounded like a raven call. They're very distinctly different. It was definitely a raven call. So this article talks about this raven that dies. Here's what's interesting. Here's an article that says, Raven Queen missing from Tower of London, feared dead. Now, why would this make headlines? Let me continue. One of the iconic ravens that resides in the Tower of London is missing, and officials fear the worst. Will the tower fall, as legend warns? Probably not. Merlina, a female raven, joined the corvid community at the tower in 2007 and has reigned since then as the ruler of the roost. But Merlina, one of 7 royal ravens, that's an interesting number, one of 7 royal ravens in the tower has been missing for several weeks, and her continued absence indicates to us that she may have sadly passed away. The Tower of London in the United Kingdom is a lofty fortress built by William the Conqueror. He began its construction in the 1070s, and other monarchs further enlarged and reinforced the building. Inside its fortified walls, Britain's kings and queens have imprisoned traitors to the crown, staged executions, stockpiled weapons, and hoarded precious jewels. They also created a home there for a small group of ravens. The birds have been known collectively as, quote, an unkindness, since at least 1486. Lore dating to the days of Charles II, King of Scotland, England and Ireland from 1660 to 1685 states that 6 ravens must live in the tower at all times, and the crown of the tower itself would fall if they left. Today, there are 7 ravens residing there, 6 official birds and 1 spare. Merlina, along with Erin, Grip, Harris, Jubilee, and Poppy, occupied lodgings in the tower's south lawn. It says, sadly, Merlina's prolonged absence suggests that the long-standing, quote, queen will return home never more. But there are several articles swirling around saying that Brits are saying that this is a bad omen. Their raven queen has died. And if you take out raven, their queen has died. Because according to legend, if there are not 6 ravens at all times kept in the tower, the kingdom of Britain will fall. Okay, so my friend sent that to me. She lives in England, and she had no idea that I had just seen these 2 dead ravens. So there it was again. And you know how it works with me. I always say that when something happens in a pattern, when something keeps repeating, to me that means pay attention. Whether it's a number, an image, a word, a name. If I pay attention and I ponder, most often a message comes. Well, then another friend of mine who didn't know about any of this, we're having a conversation in another group, and she shares with us that on Inauguration Day, she was driving from Idaho to Utah, and she looks out the window of her car and she sees a bald eagle. That's something she's never seen before, ever. And so it really caught her attention. And she noticed that there were 2 black birds with the eagle eating a dead carcass. And she thought that that was really interesting. First of all, that she'd never seen a bald eagle ever in the wild before. Second, that it happened on Inauguration Day. And third of all, that there were these 2 blackbirds with the eagle that were eating the carcass. When I heard that, there it was again. Where there were 2 of them, it makes you wonder if they were ravens. And a friend of ours pointed out, could they symbolize the 2 people that are in power right now, president and vice president? They are the 2 that are in power right now here in America. The eagle represents America. This was on Inauguration Day. She then said that as she was driving, she noticed straight ahead that the left lane was about to merge into the right lane. And there was a sign giving this heads up, giving this warning. And she said suddenly the car that was next to her in the left lane suddenly out of nowhere just swiped over and almost ran her off the road. And it terrified her. And she honked her horn and let them know, you almost ran me off the road. She said in the moment it felt intentional because there was no reason for it. She hadn't done anything to provoke it. And so she felt in the moment it was some kind of an attack, that it was intentional. She was really worried and upset. She had her little baby in the back seat. And she said eventually this car merged over and just drove normal. So she wasn't even sure if they knew what they had done or what had happened, but she said she felt like it was all somehow connected or related to Inauguration Day and what she had just seen with this eagle and these birds. And she asked for our thoughts about this. So as I was thinking about it, I thought, it's really interesting because I've had this feeling lately as I've been pondering everything that's going on, that there's a lot of things that can come from this new presidency. There's a lot of different ways that things can go, but one of the scenarios that came into my mind that I had never thought about before was that it's possible that many supporters and people who voted for this Biden presidency and have put all of their faith into it and hope that this is what's going to make things get better, it's possible that they're going to be let down, that they're going to be surprised or shocked as things begin to happen or not happen, as expectations they have possibly aren't met. And it might just be through this presidency that people start to see underneath the sheep clothing, if you know what I mean. People start to see things that they wouldn't have seen before if things would have continued on for another term with our last president. It still would have been a clear division of people who support that president and people who don't. But this way, now that he's actually in office, people are able to see him in action. He's either going to perform to their expectations or he isn't. Things are going to happen or they're not. And I just had this feeling that it's possible that this could lead people to realize, oh my goodness, I don't think this is what I want. And I even thought that we might see a lot of people merge over, so move over from the left and into the right and come together in unity that way, where people say, you know what? At the end of the day, this is not what I want. At the end of the day, this is not what I stand for, or these really aren't my principles. This isn't what I thought it was going to be, right? And I remember having that thought. So when she shared this with me, it reminded me of that thought that we just might see a lot of people leave those principles behind and merge over with the right. And when I say left and right, I'm not talking about political parties. I'm talking about values, Christian values, conservative values, family and freedom, right? So maybe, just maybe, that wouldn't have happened if things would have continued as they were before. But now that we're seeing these people in action, we start to see some of their true colors. We start to see what they're really all about as they either perform or they don't perform, or they do things that surprise us, or we find out things we weren't aware of, or whatever it may be. But it was just this feeling of this event, this inauguration, these two that are in power will be used as a part of God's plan. Like I say, he always takes things that feel so negative and hopeless, and he uses them for his benefit. So like Sister Mary said, we just have to trust and pray for the Lord's will to be done in all things, and it will. You can't go wrong with that. He knows what he's doing. Now, if you look up the word raven, here's what it says. Because of its black plumage, croaking call, and diet, the raven is often associated with loss and ill omen. Yet, its symbolism is complex. As a talking bird, the raven also represents prophecy and insight. Now, it's interesting because I saw two ravens that were dead. And the raven in the clock tower of London is believed to be dead. So it's this feeling of things dying and kingdoms falling, kingdoms collapsing, power falling. It feels like there's something to this. The devil's kingdom soon will be falling, soon will be collapsing. So as you look around and you hear and you see all these crazy and terrible things happening, in a strange way, it's sort of reassuring to know that these things must happen. They must come to pass in order for God's plan to be fulfilled, in order for his promises to be fulfilled, in order for the best part, which is yet to come, to come. Okay, so around this time, a couple of weeks ago, we received a weather alert here in Utah that there was these crazy, powerful windstorms coming in. They would come in through the night and into the next day and cause damage. And I remember my son pulled up the weather app and he said, well, that's weird because there's no temperature changes. Usually you get wind when there's pressure changes and temperature changes, but it's only changing by 2 degrees. So what's this all about? And I remember that night I didn't really hear anything. When I woke up, there was barely a breeze outside. So here where I live in Davis County, where the most damage was predicted, I didn't see a thing. There was no evidence in my yard that we had had any wind that night. However, just a couple cities over, they got it really bad. There was all kinds of destruction. So I remember there was something really strange about that, something that really said, pay attention, this isn't normal. During that same week, I came across videos and posts from people I don't even know in other places of the country who talked about strange, unexplained wind gusts that were happening where they live, just out of nowhere, that the weather meteorologists didn't even see coming. And it was interesting because here in Utah, they referred to it as east winds. These destructive, damaging east winds were coming. We've talked about east winds before and what they symbolize in scriptures in my past videos. What's funny is that same week I had been reading in my Davis County history book. Yes, I know. Probably sounds terribly boring, but I've been reading the history of the county that I live in. It's a book I found at the DI last year, and I thought, why not? I'm excited for when I get to the part where it's going to talk about my ancestors who helped settle this county. Anyways, there was a part where it started talking about the destructive east winds that come through these canyons here in our county and would destroy the farmers' crops and cause a lot of damage. And so I had been thinking about that and reflecting on that, and then I heard on the news that week that they're coming out of nowhere and they're going to create damage and destruction, but it didn't make sense because we didn't really have a weather change. Things just seemed really strange and mysterious. And then I heard that same week of these strange, mysterious east winds happening in other parts of the country, these huge gusts that just came out of nowhere and caused destruction. There was something to that. So the day that this happened here in Utah was on January 19th. And as I wrote that down in my notes, I noticed there it was, 911. Emergency, pay attention. And this was the day before Inauguration Day. So it was like these crazy, unexplained, unexpected east winds came that night, through the night and into the next day on Inauguration Day, with a warning of damage and destruction. Now, if you think about it, the direction of east to west, so winds coming from the east and rolling out across the west, symbolizes moving forward. The sun follows an east-west direction, which shows us that the world is turning and time is moving forward. And it had me thinking that change is what moves us forward. We just experienced change with this inauguration. Things are moving us forward. Forward for what? For God's plans and his promises. That same week, this documentary just pops up on YouTube. And it was in a moment when I wanted something to listen to and to watch while I was doing other things in the house. And it was called The Winds of Change. There it was again. I had no idea. It was very eye-opening, and it was all about Native American tribes and their history with these boarding schools, something that we're not really taught about in our history books, that they believe has intentionally been erased, that the public is generally unaware of. But how they were shipped off to all of these boarding schools up until, I think the last one closed down in the 80s, and that these Native American children were sent to these schools from the time when they were young, like 9 years old, until the time they were 18, and their parents never saw them. And they were sent off to be re-educated and to be turned into white Americans as far as their culture and their ways. They weren't allowed to speak their language anymore. They were required to cut their hair and dress like white people and leave all of their identity and traditions behind. And it was very difficult for them. It was very damaging emotionally and psychologically. In this documentary, many of them were saying to this day that's why so many struggle in their tribes because of this. Anyways, it was really eye-opening. I learned a lot, and I couldn't stop thinking about the title of the video, Winds of Change. There it was again. Oh, I'm feeling it right now. Feeling that. So when I wash dishes, oftentimes videos will just pop up and start playing, and because my hands are wet and soapy, I can't just keep stopping and changing the videos, so oftentimes I'll just let the videos play, and I never know what's going to pop up. And this video popped up. It was a man from another church. He was speaking to a congregation, and he had a slideshow, and I think he was giving some kind of a prophecy. I'm not sure, but this just caught my attention because there it was again about the winds. It says, "But with it and the cracking down of my fist shall be the wind. For I am holding the wind in my fists, and you shall see it in the natural. There shall be a wind that shall begin to blow in various places, and it shall be an unusual thing, and it shall even be reported, says the Lord." Well, so far this had my attention because it fits exactly what I had been hearing and what I just talked about in this video. But in this wind is the wind of change. Oh my goodness, there it was again, the winds of change. Do you see the weather vane pointing in a new direction for this nation? No, says the Spirit of the Lord, it is not in the direction of going backwards. It is in the direction of a new era. Whoa, there it was again. The opposite of going backwards. I just talked about the sun going from the east to the west, the winds coming from the east and blowing to the west, which represents moving forward. So here this was saying we're not going backwards. And then right here, direction of a new era. I just talked about in my last video message the changes with the church magazines and the magazine called The New Era and how that was significant, how we're entering this new era. And here it was again. It was just so interesting. And with this new era, listen carefully. I am about to bring what you have declared tonight. It shall be known as a shock and an awe. Therefore, stay firm, stay strong, and fear not. You will see my hand and my wind and my fists, and you will hear the movement of my feet as I shake, 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 and expose and bring to justice those and that which must be held accountable in this time, says the Lord. It's just crazy how everything in this message right here is exactly what I've been talking about in this video. I had already written up all my notes for the video, and then I came across this video while I'm doing dishes, and it kind of just confirms everything I had just thought and said. So this was just really, really fascinating. And that same day on the Weather Channel, on weather.com, here was on the top page of their front headlines, it says, "Wind danger in California, over 270,000 without power, semis blown over." So there it was again, winds from all over the country. Well, also, right around this time, during this same week, Elder Bednar gives a devotional at BYU to the students. I had no idea. And one night as I'm doing dishes, it just pops up in my YouTube feed and starts playing. I didn't realize that this was a talk he had just given the day before. I had no idea, and as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, this is really good stuff. This is something we all need to hear right now. And then I stopped and I looked at the video and saw that he had just given this the day before. I have a link to this down below if you haven't checked it out. I highly recommend it. But everything he said was music to my ears. It was exactly what I needed to hear. He talked about this event that happened here in North America that nobody really knows about, and it was miraculous. He first talked about the early sacrifices of the early saints of the church, especially the sacrifices they made with the temple to get their ordinances done in the Nauvoo temple before they had to flee. And he compared that with this event that nobody really knew about that took place again here in America with the temples. And it was so similar, it was incredible. So you know the history with the saints. They were being persecuted and pushed out of Nauvoo, and they had just finished building this beautiful temple. They were finally able to go in and actually use the temple and participate in these ordinances for their families and make these covenants with God. And they had this small window of time to do it. They had just a few days. And so in order to get all these saints into the temple to take out their ordinances, which seemed almost impossible, they realized that they would need to be there 24/7, that they were not going to close the doors to the temple. They weren't going to go home and go to bed. They were going to keep this temple operating 24 hours a day, each day until the last saint had come through. And that's exactly what they did. Well, the same thing happened here during our COVID pandemic restrictions. He said that from November 10th to November 13th, there's that number 113. Third day power in this 11th hour. And in this case, in the 11th month. So during this period, 4 days, temples here in North America were briefly opened for ordinance work, but then would be closing again to prevent the spread of COVID. So they realized they were going to need lots of volunteers to pull this off, because there were people who were scheduled to receive their own personal ordinances in the temple. There were people that had been waiting and were on the list and were looking forward to this, and it was so important, and we don't know how long these temples are going to be closed, and everybody got together and said, let's try to make this work. And the call went out for volunteers in these areas all over America. And people signed up and decided to stay through the night volunteering in the temple to help everybody who was on the schedule from that day going forward for weeks and weeks to come in during that period and get all that work done. Sounds impossible, right? That would take a miracle, right? Well, that's exactly what happened. He said, Elder Bednar said he even got word that there was one volunteer who never went home. When his shift was over, he stayed. He never went home to sleep or take a break. He stayed all 3 days in the temple. He never left it. Somehow it worked out that they had the right amount of volunteers, and these volunteers said that when they made the phone calls to all of these people saying, sorry, we're gonna have to close the temples, so we can't get you in next week to do your ordinances. Can you come in during this window? The first miracle was that these people actually answered their phones. The volunteers say usually when we call people, we get a voicemail, we have to leave a message, but for some reason, every single time they called someone, that person answered. The second miracle was that the dates that they had on their calendar to get these people in happened to be the only date and time that would work for these people. So the people would say, well, the only day and time I can come in would be on this day at this time. And the volunteers would say, well, that's perfect. That's what we were about to offer you. That's what works for us too. So the Lord already had it all figured out. He orchestrated it in such a way that it worked out for everyone. They were able to get everyone on their schedule in to receive their ordinances. Now you'll have to listen to him saying all this, because he talks about 8 separate people who all experienced a miracle. But he said the identical spirit that drew Latter-day Saints to the temple in Nauvoo clearly was at work in November of last year here in America. And he said, I promise that as you honor your covenants and strive to discern with an eye of faith, your spiritual vision will be magnified and refined to help you learn that the seemingly small miracles in your life will be mightiest and most impactful of all. I loved that. Also, right around this time, the day before inauguration, boy, there was a lot that happened that week, was of course the first presidency and members of the Quorum of the 12 getting vaccinated. And my phone just blew up with texts and emails and messages of people sending this to me and sending this to me and sending this to me. I had heard about it right when it happened, but people just kept sending it to me all day and in the days to follow. And really wanted to talk about it. It was clearly giving a lot of people a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, which, as I always say, those things don't come from the Lord. A spirit of fear does not come from the Lord. He He gives us a spirit of faith. Now that spirit of faith is exactly what President Nelson and his counselors and quorum members were demonstrating. This same day that they were vaccinated, the church released this statement. It said, "The church urges its members, employees, and missionaries to be good global citizens and help quell the pandemic by safeguarding themselves and others through immunization." Now, before we talk about this, I just want to say I've shared in my past videos that this wouldn't be a surprise. Our church is for vaccinations. Since 2002, Latter-day Saint Charities has given money to global immunization partners to create and distribute these vaccines, but also to monitor diseases, respond to outbreaks, train healthcare workers in other countries, and help create eradication programs. So this has been with measles, rubella, tetanus, polio, pneumonia, and yellow fever. So the church has supported vaccines for several years now. Now, I've talked about Gavi before in past videos. Gavi is the Global Alliance for Vaccine and Immunizations, and Latter-day Saint Charities, which is sponsored by the church, is partnered with Gavi. It says on Gavi's website that during their 2015 pledging conference in Berlin, our church and Latter-day Saint Charities pledged an additional $1 million for 2015 through the matching fund. So contributions that were received between 2012 and 2015 have been matched by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And then in 2016, LDS Charities contributed an additional $1.2 million in support of Gavi's vaccine programs. And then in 2017, LDS Charities contributed an additional $1 million to further support Gavi's vaccine programs. And then in 2019, LDS Charities contributed an additional $2 million in support of Gavi's vaccine programs. Latter-day Saint Charities also donates to these different programs with the United Nations. Here's a wheel that sort of represents all the different donors of Gavi. So we have on here the World Health Organization, the World Bank, governments, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and then of course various independent people, as well as vaccine industries and countries. On the website for Trust Stamp. And as you go down, you can see these are the different partners. You have MasterCard, Property Mark, the Biometrics Institute, Equifax, all these different organizations and companies that are partnering with Trust Stamp. What is Trust Stamp? It's Global Identity Verification. I've talked about in past videos how Trust Stamp is part of a partnership with MasterCard and Gavi to create this identification system that's also part of the World Health Pass. It's like a health immunization pass that shows your health history, that shows that you've been immunized, but it's also a way to access money and pay for things, so it's all done through this technology. On the Gavi website, it talks about MasterCard. MasterCard is one of their partners, and they've given a total of $3.8 million. And it says here, MasterCard is a technology company in the global payments industry committed to leading the way toward a world beyond cash. It says here that under the banner of efficiently delivering vaccines to millions of children, tracking identity and immunization records in a digitized manner, and incentivizing the delivery of vaccines, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance leading partner and catalyst, and MasterCard, acting in the capacity of technology partner, have embarked in a public-private partnership aiming at deploying the MasterCard Wellness Pass for interested Gavi-eligible countries on December 2018. Though major progress has been made in availing immunization in a sustainable manner, 1 in 5 children still misses out on routine life-saving immunizations. This partnership aims to leverage state-of-the-art technology by bringing the smart, into the traditional immunization programs for optimal impact in terms of reach, adherence, efficiency, and centralized record keeping of children's immunizations. You can see down here they've donated $3.8 million, which has been matched by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So it's no surprise, and it's always been out in the open, that the church donates money to vaccine organizations that support vaccines. And this is the director of Latter-day Saint Charities. Her name is Denise Chung-hoon. She's the director over the department. And she said in this article, she talks about the purpose of all of this. So I thought I would read a little bit from here to help kind of give a better perspective of why the church donates money to these organizations, because I know that there's many out there who have hesitated about this and been concerned and thought, oh my goodness, I don't have good feelings about a lot of the people that run these other organizations that we're donating to, and the things that they're trying to do just don't line up with what I support. And especially with the World Health Pass and all of that being used to access everything. I mean, it's very much like the mark of the beast when everything becomes united into one piece of technology. So you have a pass, whether it's in the form of a chip or a card, and that pass has all your information on it, your medical record, your medical history, your bank account, everything about you, your identity. And without it, you can't function. And that's kind of where the world is headed. These are the conversations and discussions that they're having at the World Economic Forum and in the United Nations meetings. All of these world leaders are coming together to come up with a way to bring the whole world on board together. And it's definitely being discussed because of the virus and this vaccination. So I think that's why a lot of people are skeptical, and it's a touchy subject, and it just doesn't feel right to a lot of people. So to help kind of ease that, I want to kind of give it from the church's perspective. So in this article, she says, joy is intertwined with the act of giving. As givers, we experience joy in our ability to relieve suffering. So the goal of Latter-day Saint Charities is to relieve suffering all over the world. She said, especially when our gift is freely given. When we receive deliverance from life's challenges, we also feel joy, particularly as we humbly and gratefully acknowledge how the sacrifices of others make our life better. Whether giver or receiver, joy inevitably accompanies any manifestation of pure love. We follow the Savior's example of charity as we respond to promptings that inspire us to give. So I want to pause right here and say this goes along with the concept that I shared recently about giving to homeless people. And I gave an example and said, a lot of people will drive past a homeless person or walk past a homeless person holding up a sign and say, well, I'd like to give money, but I don't trust how this homeless person is going to spend it. I don't know if they're going to use it to buy drugs or alcohol, so I don't want to support that. So I'm just not going to give them any money. Where it's not our job to judge how they spend their money. It's not our job to judge their choices or to judge them. Our job, all that we're required, is to give. It's about what's in our heart. We're judged by what's in our heart and our actions. So it's up to us. The Lord's counting on us to show love to His children by giving to them and making sacrifices to show that love. What they decide to do with that love is up to them. And even if they choose it for bad, they choose it to aid an addiction or whatnot, the fact of the matter is they did feel love in that moment. They did see and acknowledge that another human being gave them something that they were asking for and desiring. So God's not asking us to make those judgments. He's only asking us to give and to care for His children, to help fulfill their needs, and to show that love and kindness. She goes on to say, the purpose of philanthropies is to encourage all to come unto Christ, striving to become like Him by experiencing joy in the giving process. Because of you illustrates many ways positive change is being accomplished as the Lord transforms individual lives across the globe. It reminds me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And in his hierarchy of needs, for those of you who aren't familiar with this is what I studied in college. It's this chart, and it shows here that if our physical needs aren't met, then we really can't acknowledge these other needs that we have. And I would put in here spiritual needs. So if we are starving, we're hungry, we're sick, we have all these physical ailments, it's really hard for us to develop a testimony, to develop those spiritual needs. It's really hard to do that until our physical needs are met. When suddenly we have a roof over our head and we've been fed a meal, then we're better able to give attention to these other needs, especially our spiritual needs. So that's what this reminds me of, is as Latter-day Saint Charities and as us as members of the church give to the Lord's children who are in need and who are suffering, well, then it betters their lives. And through that, they feel God's love. And that's what opens up the door for them to become interested in God and in learning about the gospel. And so it's not the church's job to judge these organizations and how they're deciding to use these donations, but it's the church's job just to give all over the world. And truthfully, it is through these large organizations that health needs are met all over the world, especially in these third world countries. And the Lord sees that we're doing our part. The Lord sees that the members are giving, and then the Lord sees that the church is using those donations, that money, to continue giving all over the world. And the result of that so many times is doors opening up in other nations. You know, these leaders of these governments of these other countries, when they see that our church is a global church and we're giving money and caring about citizens of their countries, well, that softens their hearts and better helps them to work with us to get the gospel in their nations, to get missionaries in their countries, to set up meeting houses and temples. The Lord's work can't go forward if we're not able to get into these other countries. And what better way to get into these other countries than to help meet the needs of their citizens? And we do that through these charities, through these charitable contributions and donations. And if you've read President Nelson's biography, then you know how he's so good at this. It talks about how there's been many times he's gone in and he's been able to soften a heart of a leader or a dictator and get into their country by simply asking, what do you need? What are the needs of your citizens? What is the need of your country? Let us help. And whatever it was, if it was too many orphans or alcoholism, too many citizens that have substance abuse problems, then President Nelson would offer help and assistance from our church to go in and help the citizens of this country, to go in and help these governments get these issues under control. And so that's what we're all about. We're all about giving and helping. The Lord isn't requiring us to judge these dictators or judge these nations or these organizations. He's only requiring us to give, because it's through giving and service and charity that softens hearts and opens up doors. So I hope that helps put your mind and heart at ease to realize that it's just our job. We're just required to give, not to judge the receiver. And our missionaries are required to get certain vaccines in order to serve missions abroad in other countries. Now, of course, you aren't required as a member of the church to be vaccinated. For missionaries who don't want to be vaccinated, they still get to serve a mission, just not abroad in a foreign country. So here's the official statement from the church. It says, in word and deed, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has supported vaccinations for generations. As a prominent component of our humanitarian efforts, the church has funded, distributed, and administered life-saving vaccines throughout the world. Vaccinations have helped curb or eliminate devastating communicable diseases such as polio, diphtheria, tetanus, smallpox, and measles. Vaccinations administered by competent medical professionals protect health and preserve life. As this pandemic spreads across the world, the church immediately canceled meetings, closed temples, and restricted other activities because of our desire to be good global citizens and do our part to fight the pandemic. Now, COVID-19 vaccines that many have worked, prayed and fasted for are being developed, and some are being provided. Under the guidelines issued by local health officials, vaccinations were first offered to healthcare workers, first responders, and other high-priority recipients. Because of their age, senior church leaders over 70 now welcome the opportunity to be vaccinated. As appropriate opportunities become available, the church urges its members, employees, and missionaries to be good global citizens and help quell the pandemic by safeguarding themselves and others through immunization. Individuals are responsible to make their own decisions about vaccination. In making that determination, we recommend that where possible, they counsel with a competent medical professional about their personal circumstances and needs. So to me, this statement, for one, is showing the world, look, the church is doing our part, which I believe is key with all that's coming, especially with persecution among the religious community, which has already started. It would make sense that our church put the Lord's priority, which is continuing the work all over the world, putting that priority first by showing the world, look, we're doing something. We're doing our part like everyone else, which is good as to not be on the radar for persecution, as to be in good standing with world governments so that we can continue to get into those countries and nations and share the gospel. I mean, that's the most important thing right now, if you think about it, is gathering Israel on both sides of the veil. And we know it's obvious that if it requires a vaccine to continue gathering Israel to get into these countries and to ease the tension of global governments and world leaders, well, that's what we would do as a church, is put God's work first. Put that first above everything else. I mean, if you think about it, if the message was going out that the religious communities, and especially our church, are resisting all of this, well, that would interfere with the work. That would create tensions, damage relationships, create negative PR, create negative publicity, and send us moving backwards with the work. As the Lord's prophet right now, President Nelson has a huge responsibility on his shoulders to help roll this work out throughout the entire world, to get the gospel into every nation before the Lord returns. That's priority right now. That means, as a church, we're gonna do whatever it takes to help that happen. Not our will be done, but thy will be done. And I'm feeling that right now. Now, you know, I said in my last video message that if the prophet asked us to take this vaccine, I would do it. Yes, I do not like vaccines. Yes, I am very aware of what's being put into these particular vaccines. And as you know, as I've shared before, I never felt good about it. Something that I didn't want voluntarily. Still to this day, I get texts and emails and messages coming in all the time showing me these compilations of stories and negative testimonials and reviews coming in from people who wanted the vaccine and got it and experienced horrible side effects. And it's just one after the other, after the other, after the other, to the point where I think even one article said that they started to recall one of the vaccines in California because there had been so many problems with it. And we know that this vaccine is being called a miracle vaccine, but at the same time it's also being called an experimental vaccine because we don't know yet what all the side effects are because it's so new. With all other vaccines, they've been tested for years and years and years and gone through several studies before they were allowed to be given and administered to the public. But this vaccine has been different, and that has raised a lot of red flags. There's a lot of people who haven't felt good about that and who haven't wanted it personally for themselves or their family. And I'm one of those people, as you know. But as I've said in my past video messages, I will always do what the prophet asks of me. And as you can see, we're getting into that time where we're going to be asked to do more and more difficult things. I think we've had sort of a false assumption about that. I think many of us, when we think, yes, we know that the prophet is going to ask us to do difficult things, and as we think about what those things might be, we think of things that would be more difficult for other members of the church, but not us personally, right? We think we'll be obedient to everything, but yes, he's going to ask us to do things that are probably a struggle for other members. But I don't think any of us ever thought that the things that we would be asked to do would be difficult for us. This is the perfect example. A vaccine is difficult for a lot of us. Members of the church who I've known for years, who are the most stalwart, elect of the elect, have struggled with this vaccine. This is difficult for them. But as I've been a part of this conversation with other friends, I keep hearing this is one of those circumstances where we really need to pick our battles. We need to save our energy for the very end battle. That these battles, as big as they feel, are actually very small compared to what's coming. And if our prophet and the leaders are not only getting this themselves, but encouraging the members to do so as well, then why do we have that spirit of fear? That spirit of fear, as I always say, does not come from the Lord. He gives us a spirit of faith. If we choose to follow the prophet, which is something that has been instilled into us ever since we were little, you know the primary song, follow the prophet, follow the prophet, follow the prophet, don't go astray. Follow the prophet, follow the prophet, follow the prophet, he knows the way. It's been that way all throughout the history of the scriptures, clear back to the Old Testament. This is nothing new. Prophets counseling the Lord's children to do hard things, to do difficult things. And they had a choice to either follow the prophet, trusting in the Lord with that spirit of faith, or saying, no way, I don't want any part of this, and going another path. When you choose to follow the prophet, as we've seen all throughout history, clear back to the Old Testament, that's where the blessings are. That's where the miracles are. And President Nelson said this. He said, with approval from our physician, my wife, Wendy, and I were vaccinated today against COVID-19. We are very grateful. This was the first week either of us was eligible to receive the vaccine. We are thankful for the countless doctors, scientists, researchers, manufacturers, government leaders, and others who have performed the grueling work required to make this vaccine available. We have prayed often for this literal godsend. As a former surgeon and medical researcher, I know something of the effort needed to accomplish such a remarkable feat. Producing a safe, effective vaccine in less than a year is nothing short of miraculous. I was a young surgeon when in 1953, Dr. Jonas Salk announced that he had developed a vaccine against the cruel and crippling disease of polio. I then watched the dramatic impact that the vaccine had on eradicating polio as most people around the world were vaccinated. For generations, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has donated considerable resources to making vaccinations available for people in developing countries. Vaccinations have helped to eliminate diseases such as diphtheria and smallpox. My professional and ecclesiastical experiences convince me that vaccinations administered by competent medical professionals protect health and preserve life. Receiving the vaccine today was part of our personal efforts to be good global citizens in helping to eliminate COVID-19 from the world. Now, I've said before in past videos that the book that I read last year that was so life-changing for me was reading President Nelson's biography. I felt like when I read his biography, I got to know him on a personal level, which really increased my trust, not only in him as a person and as a medical professional, but as the prophet of the Lord's church. If you have never read his biography, I highly, highly recommend it. Now would be the best time more than ever to read that. But you see how close he is to the Lord all throughout his life, the experiences that he's had, the things that he's had to do to open up doors in other countries to help this work go forward, how the Lord has really used him in such a miraculous way. And you get to know him on a level you otherwise never would. which helps you feel that you're not just going by blind faith, that you really do trust and have faith, not only in the Lord, but you have faith and trust that this man, this prophet who's leading the Lord's church, truly is doing the Lord's will every day of his life. On behalf of all of us and generations who came before and will come after. Now, when this news first broke, it was in the morning, and it actually brought me peace. And honestly, when I saw it, the minute I read that headline, it was sort of like this. That's exactly how I felt. And some of my friends said the same thing because it was finally out there. We were just waiting. We just wanted to hear from the prophet and the leaders of the church one way or the other. There was a lot of anticipation during this time. Which way is it going to be? It probably will go this way, but maybe it won't. Maybe it will always just be neutral and left up to the members, and nothing will ever be said more than that. Maybe it will be more of a subtle suggestion. So to hear something as concrete as this just felt like, sigh of relief, right? It's finally done. It's been said. And if it's coming from President Nelson, if it's coming from the church, we can have peace about it. And just as it was recommended, we be prayerful about it and talk to our doctor about it. Now, am I running out to get a vaccine as soon as it becomes available? Probably not. It's probably going to take more time for me. But I know that as it gets to that moment where the pressure is really there, I will do it. And to be honest, it did relieve some burden from me, because as we have seen society say that businesses are getting on board with this and you're not going to be able to do business with them or travel or whatnot, I started to worry about how that would work for me and my family. And I have to say, I don't think that this is the system. The vaccine itself is not the system of the beast. As we read in our church doctrine, the beast is a system, but the vaccine itself is not that system. So I think there's a lot of people who thought, well, if I get this vaccine, am I taking the mark? And that was just repulsive beyond anything, right? But I really do feel peace personally that the vaccine itself is not that system. It's not that mark. Maybe there's something coming down the road that will be more evident, that if you sign up for it, it puts you into this system. That would be something that would raise an eyebrow for me. But I felt more and more over this last week as I've pondered all of this, that we need to set all of our fears and uncertainties aside and put the Lord's will first above all things. And if we truly have faith in the Lord, then that should eradicate our fear. If we put the Lord's will first, which is the gathering of Israel on both sides of the veil, and we show the Lord that we're doing all that we can, whatever is in our power and control to do here on the earth, to assist in that gathering, to assist in His work, He's going to bless us and protect us. He tells us this all throughout Scripture. This is who He is. This is the God that we serve. He's a God of protection, a God of miracles, someone that we can really put our trust and our faith into, who is never going to let us down. In fact, there's even a scripture that's a great reminder. A friend of mine brought this up. In Doctrine and Covenants, section 84, the Lord says, "Go ye into all the world, and unto whatsoever place ye cannot go, ye shall send, that the testimony may go from you into all the world unto every creature." So it's like a commandment. The Lord's telling the church, go into all the world. And these signs shall follow them that believe. So these are the signs that you can look for among the believers. And if any man shall administer poison unto them, it shall not hurt them. And the poison of a serpent shall not have power to harm them. So we go about doing the Lord's work and trusting in Him. And if any man has ill intentions and deceives us and gives us poison against our knowledge or against our will, that poison will not harm the believers. It will not harm us. And the poison of a serpent shall not have power to harm them. This is powerful, that it would bring up the example of a snake. The symbol of pharmaceuticals is always a snake wrapped around a cup. And to some, they say, well, this is terrible. This is just right out there in the open. This just proves that pharmacies, create things that are poisonous. We drink them, we take them into our bodies, they make money off of it, but they're designed to harm us, and that's what this is representing. And then others say, no, this is more along the lines of it takes poisonous snake venom to receive the antidote to fight off that same poisonous snake venom. And then again, others are reminded of what happened in the garden, how the snake represents deception into eating something and being deceived by that. And so they're very wary when they see this logo. And then there's the opposite again with this example. The Lord told Moses to fashion a brass serpent on a rod and to command all those who would look upon it that they would be healed of the poisonous snake bites that they were experiencing in the desert. So in this example, in this experience, the snake symbolized healing. It symbolized the healing power of the Savior. But back to this image right here. According to this scripture, that if we are believers and we have that faith in the Lord, then the poison of a serpent shall not have power over us. So even if that represents the pharmaceutical companies, and we believe we're taking something that's actually supposed to be helping us, even if it's been designed to do the opposite, even if there's been ill intentions behind it, and there's been poison put into that, it will not harm us if we are believers, if we have that faith, as we're doing the Lord's work. Now, throughout history, prophets have asked the Lord's children to do hard things, very difficult things, or even things that were repulsive, such as the brass serpent. But the children of Israel, who were being afflicted by all of these poisonous serpents in the desert, would look at this golden brass serpent that looked like an idol. If they would just look at that, they would receive a miracle. They would live. They would survive that snake bite, that poisonous venom. But there were many Israelites who were repulsed by that and said, that's a pagan thing, that's an idol. That goes against what we've been taught. I don't want to look at that. How is that going to give me a miracle from God? And many of them chose not to look, and they perished. But those who put their faith in the Lord and listened to the prophet Moses and looked at that golden image of that serpent, they received life. They were saved. I always say that what we're studying in Come Follow Me each week always relates to what's going on in the world. And we saw that during this week when the leaders got the vaccine. Look here in section 3, this is what we had been studying. It says, the works and the designs and the purposes of God cannot be frustrated, neither can they come to naught. For God doth not walk in crooked paths, neither doth he turn to the right hand nor to the left, neither doth he vary from that which he hath said. Therefore his paths are straight, and his course is one eternal round. Remember that it is not the work of God that is frustrated, but the work of men. And then down in verse 4, check this out. It says, yet if he boasts in his own strength and sets at naught the counsels of God and follows after the dictates of his own will and carnal desires, he must fall and incur the vengeance of a just God upon him. So it's saying right here, although a man may have many revelations and have power to do many mighty works, if he boasts in his own strength and sets at naught the counsels of God. And when I heard counsels of God, I heard counsel of the prophet, counsel of our leaders, counsel of the Lord's anointed who speak for him. When we reject their counsel, whose counsel are we really rejecting? We're rejecting the counsel of God. And it says right here, if he boasts of his own strength and follows after the dictates of his own will. So I've talked about this. When we say our will over the Father's will, this is against my will. This is something that I don't want to do. So it goes against my own will. And we boast in our own strength, thinking, I'm healthy, I'm good, I don't need this, I don't feel that this is right, I don't want this, I'm a strong person, I'm a healthy person, I believe in my immune system, which is how most of us feel, right? But when we go that route and boast in our own strength and we go after the dictates of our own will, what we want, then we deny the counsels of God. And the Lord clearly says in this verse, if we go this route, if we go down this path, we must fall. It's better to follow the counsel of the Lord even when it doesn't make any sense to us, even when it feels strange to us. It's better to follow the counsel of the Lord because when we do, we know that we're on the right path, we know that we will be blessed, and we know that we will be protected. And we don't have to fear what corrupt and conspiring men are doing behind the scenes right now, because it says right here in verse 1, the works and the designs and the purposes of God cannot be frustrated. They will come to pass. What God says will happen will happen. And he tells us right here in verse 7, for behold, you should not have feared man more than God. You know what I hear in that? You should not fear the vaccine more than God. You shouldn't fear man more than me. Although men set at naught the counsels of God and despise his words, yet ye should have been faithful, and he would have extended his arm and supported you against all the fiery darts of the adversary, and he would have been with you in every time of trouble. So I'm hearing in that, if you're faithful, if you follow through with the counsel of God, when you're obedient and you listen, then God will be there to protect you from everything that the devil throws your way. He'll protect you from those fiery serpents, from those poisonous, venomous snake bites, from the poisons of men, from the conspiring plans of the enemy. He will protect you, and he will be with you in your times of trouble. You have nothing to fear when you're following his counsel. Whether the counsel makes sense or whether it doesn't, just follow it. This had me thinking about and pondering other examples all throughout the scriptures where the Lord asked his servants to do things that were not only difficult, but also went against their own conscience or went against the Lord's own commandments. The first example that came to mind, and I shared this with a group of friends, was Nephi. What was it the Lord asked him to do? He asked him to behead Laban, to chop off his head with his own sword. And remember what Nephi said? He said, but Lord, I've never killed another man before. This doesn't feel right. I don't feel good about this. But the Lord said, look, it's better for one wicked man to perish than for a whole nation of people to dwindle in unbelief. Because Laban had the records. Laban had the plates. He wasn't willing to give that to Nephi. It was better for him, a wicked man, to perish than for generations of the children of God to never hear his word and have that truth and knowledge. The Lord always has a plan, and even when things don't make sense and seem to contradict what we've been taught or go against our own better judgment or conscience, that's when our training kicks in. That's what I call it. Out of habit of always being obedient. Our training in obedience, that's where that comes in handy. If we've gone our whole life not being obedient to all of the Lord's commandments and all of the things that the prophets have counseled us to do, if we've gone throughout our life picking and choosing the things that we want to do and maybe some of the things we don't want to do because it's not convenient or we just don't like it or agree with it, if we've lived our life and walked our gospel path doing that, then when the time comes when the Lord asks us to do difficult things and the prophet asks us to do things that will be very hard, well, most likely we're going to resist it or say, well, I'm not going to do that. That's not for me. But if we've trained that spiritual muscle our whole life to always be obedient no matter what, then when things like this happen, we don't even hesitate. We know what to do. And we know from past experience what happens when we're obedient. Miracles come through obedience. Not just obedience to temple covenants and obedience to commandments, but obedience to the counsel of the Lord's anointed, of his servants, and obedience to the promptings of the Spirit. So in situations like this, you have to take a step back and say, am I listening to the spirit of fear and all things fearful about this vaccine and making my judgment and decision based off of that? Or am I tuning all of that out and going directly to the Lord and saying, Lord, what is your will? and getting that confirmation for myself. That's the difference. But I can tell you right now, this may seem like a huge thing, but it's very small compared to the things that are coming. If we can't handle something like this, if we can't be obedient for something like this, we don't have a chance with the things that are coming. I look at this as sort of like a test. Am I willing to do things that I don't want to do, that are very hard for me, that repulse me, right? Am I willing to set aside my own fears and my own hesitations to tune into the voice of the Lord and to seek His will, to put that above my own fears? It's no coincidence that we've been reading in Doctrine and Covenants. In section 1, I talked about this in my last video, that it says in there that the voice of the Lord is all the same, whether it's coming straight from Him out of the clouds or whether it's coming through the mouth of His servants. It is all the same. It is all His voice. It is all one. So if He has anointed His servants to speak for Him here on the earth, and we reject that because we say, well, they're just men, and we don't put our trust in the arm of the flesh. We're not rejecting men. We're rejecting the voice of the Lord. Who He has anointed is who He speaks through. It is His voice. You have to make that choice. If you haven't made it now, I'll keep you in my prayers. But you have to make that choice. Am I going to follow the prophet in all things? Am I going to be obedient to the Lord in all things? Or am I going to go my own way? We're at that point now where we're at a crossroads. You're either on one side or the other. You're either obedient to the voice of the Lord or you're not. This is that point on the timeline that our prophets have prepared us for. They've been telling us for a long time now that the time is coming where you can't be in the middle. You can't be on the fence. You can't be gray. You're either dedicated and obedient or you're not. Another example of this is Abraham and Isaac. The Lord commanded Abraham to sacrifice, to kill his only son, a son who he was blessed with through a miracle by God. This contradicted everything that he knew. He thought, well, my goodness, my wife and I had prayed for years to have a child, and Lord, you finally gave us a child. You finally gave us that miracle, and now you want us to kill him? A lot of people refer to that as the Abrahamic trial. When things happen in your life that really test your faith, but not only your faith, your obedience. We've seen examples of this all throughout the scriptures. But how foolish of us to think that hard things will only be for other members of the church. And those warnings of be close to the Spirit because the time is coming where if you're not close to the Spirit, you will be deceived. Even the very elect will be deceived. How foolish of us to think, well, that's not me. I would never be deceived. I'm close to the Spirit. I'm obedient. So these hard things must be for those other saints that have been sitting on the fence and not keeping all of the commandments. Maybe we had imaginations of, oh, maybe one day I'll be asked to leave my home and go to Missouri, right? Oh, I will do that. I will say yes. That's something that's probably going to be hard for a lot of people, but I'll do it. Right? Or maybe one day we're going to be asked to take a stand against all of this evil that's going on. I'll do that, no problem, right? But that's going to be hard for some of these other saints, right? How foolish for us to think that no, the Lord is going to give us opportunities to have our faith tested and to show where our obedience really lies through things that would be hard for us. A vaccine is hard for me, but obedience is not. As I was thinking about what Nephi was asked to do and Abraham was asked to do, I thought, oh my goodness, what if one day the prophet asked us to sign up for this system? Oh my goodness, I think I would die. Anyways, I just have to have a sense of humor because if you don't, it's a lot harder to get through these times. But I've put myself lately in a position in my mind where I've gone into those scenarios and thought, what if the things that we're asked to do are things we would never expect? Things that go against what we feel is right or go against what we've always been taught. Just like with Abraham, just like with Nephi, a contradiction. That would really test your faith and your obedience. And doesn't the Lord require that of us? He needs that from us to do the work that He needs us to do during this winding up scene, during this very last minute before His return. It would be foolish of us to think that we would be spared from these trials of faith and tests of obedience. So I'll say it right now, be excited about it. Do your best to be excited about it, to be excited to exercise your obedience, to put all your faith and trust in the Lord and in His plan, even when it doesn't make sense. Isn't that how it always is? Isn't that the pattern throughout scriptures, throughout history? Most things never made sense. Jesus asking Naaman to dip 7 times in the dirty Jordan River to be healed. And as another friend pointed out, Jesus spitting into dirt and making clay and asking someone to put it on their eyes in order to be healed. Jonah being asked to go preach to one of the most wicked cities in the world, believing that if he goes there, it's like a lamb to the slaughter. It just didn't make any sense. And there's story after story after story in the scriptures of the Lord asking His servants to do things that don't make sense, or that terrify them, that scare them, or that go against what they feel is safe and right. But we've read what the outcome always is. There's a miracle every time. If we immerse ourselves in the scriptures daily and continually fill ourselves with these reminders, with the Word of God, with His truth, with His track record, as we read the scriptures daily, we're reminded daily that God is always in control. He always has a plan, and when we're obedient, He sends the miracle. Again, if you've read President Nelson's biography and you've read about the way he works on a global level to help get the gospel into other countries, well, then this news in the last week shouldn't be any surprise to you. A lot of us saw this coming and believed it would happen. And now that it's happened, there really is this sigh of relief, because truly, if you trust in the Lord and you trust in His prophet, you feel that peace, you feel that relief. There's no need to have that spirit of fear, even if things don't make any sense at all. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego chose obedience over the fear of man, and they knew that that meant certain death in a fiery furnace, do you think that stopped them from being obedient? No. Do you think they wanted to die a fiery death? No. But they remained obedient and a miracle came. Their lives were spared. This reminded me of the times that my children have been required to get certain vaccinations for school. My kids go to public school, and it was very difficult for me. I really didn't want them getting all of these vaccines. And I remember having this feeling, you can pray and bless these vaccines before they're given to your children. I felt that my kids were to go to school. They wanted to be in school. They wanted to be with their friends. This is what they wanted. It felt right. It felt that they were supposed to be in school. They were supposed to make these friendships and have the impact that they've had on their peers and whatnot. And that felt right. What didn't feel right was giving them these vaccines. They didn't want them, and I didn't see how they were all necessary, but I remember having that feeling of it'll all be okay. It will all work out. You can pray and bless these vaccines. So before the nurses came in, I would say a prayer and pray over these vaccines so that they would have no harmful effects on my kids. And then I would feel peace. And sure enough, they'd be given these vaccines and we haven't experienced any harm. Now I know I've heard from lots of my friends who have experienced vaccine injuries with themselves or with their children, and so they've been very hesitant about this. Which honestly, these stories to the hesitations that I've always had. But again, I love that the church has said that it's important that you not only take this to the Lord, but that you consult with your physician. I have a friend that has allergic reactions to vaccines every single time. I'm sure that as she takes this to the Lord and also to her physician, she'll get a confirmation on what she is to do. Now I know that those words good global citizen is a trigger for a lot of people. But at the same time, we need to be doing all that we physically can, all that's physically possible to help the work roll forward, to help gather Israel. And if using words like good global citizen is what it takes to soften the hearts and soften the ears of global governments to help us keep those doors open in other nations, then it makes sense. God will lead the way. He'll show us what to do so that we can continue doing His work, His way, according to His will. Not our way, according to our own plans, but His way, His will. Just like what Sister Marriott said, if we seek out His will in all things, we have no reason to be afraid. I truly believe that. I think a lot of us were thinking, okay, we know persecution is coming, we're expecting it, so we're ready to have to do things that separate us from the world. We're ready to have to do things that are going to make the world angry at us, right? And so we were expecting that with this vaccine, and people were thinking, okay, wait a minute. If we're going along and doing what everyone else is doing in the world, for example, with this vaccine, where does the persecution come from? If we're going along and doing everything that the world is doing to be good global citizens, how are we ever going to be persecuted? This doesn't make sense, right? Again, this has to do with always having these expectations of what the Lord's plans are and how we think everything is going to play out. Just get rid of those expectations because most of the time they're going to be wrong. I even thought about this. I thought, how tricky is the adversary? If the adversary knows what God is trying to do right now, that He is trying to get His work accomplished before His Son returns, then wouldn't the adversary do all that he can to stop that work from going forward? Wouldn't he use fear to stir up the saints and the members of the church to submit to fear and have that spirit of resistance that would put a stop to the work, that would cause the church to be a target of persecution, tensions, and doors closing? That would be the plan of the adversary. So tune out all those other voices of negativity and doubt and fear, and try to have that tunnel vision with the Lord at the end of the tunnel, with His anointed servants at the end of the tunnel. Just focus on Him. Just focus on that counsel. Be obedient. Tune everything else out. That's how you'll get through this. That's how you'll find peace. It's like that saying when people are afraid of heights. You know those scenes in the movies where they're trying to rescue someone and be the hero, and then suddenly for a moment, someone looks down and loses their faith. And the advice always is, don't look down. When you look down and you see how high up you really are, that fear becomes very real and you could fall. But if you keep your eyes straight ahead on the destination, on where you need to get to for safety, tune out what's down below, chances are you're gonna get there safely. So I wrote in my notes, our God can save us if it's His will, but if not, we submit to whatever His will is. I saw getting this vaccine in a way as a sacrifice, a huge sacrifice. Giving up your body to allow someone to put something into it that you feel may be harmful for you. But even Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son, Isaac, his whole world, his everything, for the will of the Lord. I wrote in my notes, yes, the Lord could stop this from all happening. He could rescue us. He could lift us up to be with Him, or hide us away somewhere in the wilderness and keep us safe. But if not, we submit to His will. As long as we are doing the Lord's will and not giving in to our fear of man, we can have peace. And God's will is always for us to follow the prophet. Are we succumbing to the pressures of men, or in other words, the pressures of the world, or following the Lord and His servants? Now, there have been some people that have said, well, not all of the leaders got it. Some chose not to. And I just have to point out that actually all of the members that qualified, so the leaders of the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 that qualified for the vaccine, meaning that they were age 70 or older, they chose to get it. They all chose to get it. And the apostles who didn't receive it were under the age of 70. I checked all of their ages. So they were obedient. They did get it along with President Nelson. And someone shared this in a group. The brethren will have to have the vaccine in order to travel and minister to members throughout the world. I think they are willing to do whatever they have to do to be out among the people again. They may also know that this vaccine is inevitable and want to lessen fear over what is coming. And the week before this event, President Nelson tweeted this. It was almost as if in preparation for what was to come. He said, "We are here on earth to be tested, to see if we will choose to follow Jesus Christ, to repent regularly, to learn, and to progress. Our spirits long to progress, and we do that best by staying firmly on the covenant path." Also meaning by being obedient to the Lord. Okay, moving on. I have in my notes some random thoughts. I had remembered reading somewhere, studying somewhere years ago, something about how it's believed that prior to the flood, that the years on the earth were shorter. I don't remember the science behind that, but I remember that there were scholars who wrote about this and said that it was believed that before the flood, time was different on the earth, and that after the flood, it changed everything, and the days and the years were longer. And so when we think of Adam living to his old age and all of the prophets and patriarchs living for 800 or 900 years, and we think, how is that possible, right? I remember reading that and thinking, well, that would make more sense. 900 years according to how years were before the flood. Which converted over to our time and our years would be more like 300 or 400 years, which is still a long time. But I remember reading about this, and I'm curious if anyone out there has heard of this as well. If you have any resources, let me know. But I remember thinking, what if as the earth changes again, when the Lord returns with that event, that the millennium going forward, we're told that the earth will become like it was with the Garden of Eden. And it had me thinking, will days again become shorter than they are now? So when we hear that the millennium is 1,000 years, it's not in terms of time as we know it now. It's not in terms of years as we know them now. That they're as they were before, that it's much shorter. I don't know if this is making any sense. It's just a random thought that I had in my notes. And I thought I'll probably, going forward, have a place in my video called Random Thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And then I came across this article. It says, "The Earth is spinning faster than at any time in the past 50 years, scientists reveal." Somebody wrote, and except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. But I was in a conversation with some friends, and someone pointed out that my friend had personally asked this question to, I believe it was Elder Bednar. Well, can't we just wait and do all that work when the Lord returns? It'll be so much easier because we'll be able to get that information so much better. Our ancestors will be able to come to us and tell us they want their work done, and they'll know all of their information. And he said, the reason it's important that we do this work now and not wait for the millennium is because simply the millennium isn't enough time to get this work done. So that had me again thinking about time as we know it versus how it used to be. Anyways, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. So I've addressed a lot of questions that have been coming in, but at this point in the video, I'm going to bring up a couple of questions that some people reached out to me and asked that are kind of separate from all the other questions that have been coming in. This first one here says, "The prophet said that the peace of the world will be taken, but we will be fine. I don't understand. If the whole country and world are in trouble, how can we be fine? What do you think?" And then there was a follow-up question. "Some people said that the Lord will protect us, the members of the church, but how does he do that?" Well, I'm going to respond to that by saying that's the importance of building up Zion. That was the whole theme of this past General Conference, was that urgency to build up Zion. Zion is a mighty fortress, is what keeps us separate from the world and safe from what's going on in the world. Now, of course, there's figurative Zion and literal Zion. Figuratively meaning Zion is in our hearts. So no matter where we are in the world, no matter where our location is, if we have Zion in our hearts, we have that unity and that peace. And then there's literal Zion, the location here in North America. This mighty city that's been prophesied will be mighty and terrible to the world. They will fear Zion because they see that the Lord's power is there and protects it. Now we know whether or not we're in the physical location of Zion or we're somewhere else, but we're a part of Zion from a distance, it's in our heart, we still have that promise of protection, that unseen protection around us. That's where the miracles come in. We've been told, it says it in the scriptures, that in these last days we will witness miracles greater than the miracles in the Bible. We're coming into that prophesied time. So you have to believe in God's power and in miracles. Again, you have to trust in God's plans even when they don't make sense. Obedience is what brings the miracle. It's what brings the blessings. And yes, we're promised that even though we might not be shielded from all the tribulations of the last days, we can be protected when we're obedient. So the answer lies in faith, hope, and charity, which helps us trust in the Lord, but also our obedience, which is a result of that faith, hope, and charity. If we don't have those three things that the scriptures tell us are essential for entering the kingdom of God, well then naturally we're not going to be obedient. So Zion in your heart is living those principles of faith, hope, and charity, which brings about the natural result of obedience, and that together brings about the miracles, the blessings, the protection. So truthfully, it's those simple primary answers of living our life every day trying to be like Jesus. Having that faith, hope, and charity. Exercising that faith, hope, and charity daily. That's what changes our hearts and helps us want to be obedient, which is what brings about the miracles, the protection, and the blessings. All right, before we end with the summary of this video, here's these last few weeks in screenshots. Here's a review. I remember when this popped up, and it was the first time I had seen this headline, Trump declares state of emergency in DC ahead of inauguration. Yes, that's how long it's been since I've put out a video. But I remember thinking, oh my goodness, that's a pay attention word right there, state of emergency. We are in a state of emergency, and you can look at that at a literal level or also a spiritual level, but I believe our nation is in a state of emergency. And now here's a screenshot that a friend sent me when President Trump was speaking. This was right around this time, so I'm trying to do these screenshots in order, but I might not have them quite in the right order. Anyways, look at the top left corner. Look at those numbers, 144. And so pay attention. There it is again, pay attention. Now again, 144 always symbolizes the gathering of Israel, the 144,000. Could these events that are happening be lining up to somehow assist with that gathering? Do they somehow play a role into the gathering? Another reason why we can have peace during these turbulent times, because this is all a part of God's plan. Then came this headline right around the same time. Ignored by media, flashbangs were going off at U.S. Capitol before Trump finished his speech. Antifa organized protests near U.S. Capitol before it was stormed. And so they were just saying again, people heard these sounds. It was like warfare going off at the Capitol while Trump was still giving his speech before he even asked everybody to walk over to the Capitol. These loud bomb-like sounds were going off, and so there was definitely something going on that just didn't make sense. Now remember, in my last video message, my friend's son shared that dream. In the dream, he saw Kamala Harris, and she had this slogan. She had become president, and her slogan was something about the new American dream. And so when I saw this is the cover of Vogue magazine, I saw this on YouTube, it just popped up, and there it was, Kamala Harris and the new America. That stood out to me. Leading up to the inauguration, there were these strange blackouts around the world. This was the first that I was notified about. It says unusual blackout stretching through Vatican City and in Pakistan. There's a live feed from the Vatican just showing how dark it is at the moment. So this spurred a lot of rumors, and a lot of people were guessing something's going down and we may not know about it, but that's usually the purpose of an intentional blackout, is to take care of business behind the scenes without people seeing what's going on. Who knows? One of the rumors going around was that the Pope had been arrested and he was in custody, and I couldn't find anything to verify that. In fact, they were saying, well, that wouldn't make sense because he's speaking right now. He's speaking from the Vatican, and this is something he does every Sunday, so this wouldn't make sense. And then somebody said that the speaking was recorded, pre-recorded or something. He had put out some tweets that day. They said that the tweets were automated. And what did stand out to me is on his own Twitter account, I believe it was his Twitter account, I was scrolling through and I saw that he had posted that day that he would not physically be able to make it and be in person over at the Sistine Chapel, which I guess is customary when there's baptisms. He attends those. I wasn't sure what the tradition is, but he said that he would not physically be able to be there, and this would be the first time, either the first time ever or the first time in a very long time that he would physically not make it that Sunday. So that did stand out to me. That did warrant some attention. I had some friends ask me my thoughts about it, and here's a text that I sent, and then look, I noticed the time, 113, my pay attention number. I just wrote, wow, if this is true, I guess he made an appearance today, but at the same time he posted something that said he couldn't be at the Sistine Chapel, which is customary. Maybe he's on house arrest. Who knows? And I haven't looked into it since this day, and I haven't heard anything more about it. However, I did see this. This came out shortly after. 9 Catholic bishops die in a single week. They're saying that this was COVID related, but then people are saying, was it COVID related? You know how that goes. You know how these type of stories stir up rumors and all kinds of theories and whatnot. But I have to say, there was so much pointing to the Catholic Church right now. It was something loud saying, pay attention, pay attention. I'm not sure how this all correlates, but there definitely are some red flags to pay attention to for sure. And then here's a screenshot about the Pakistan headline. Blackout across Pakistan after national grid breakdown. Government urges calm. It says the electricity distribution system in the nation of more than 210 million people is a complex and delicate web, and a problem in one section of the grid can lead to cascading breakdowns countrywide. So it was interesting that this happened right at the same time as the Vatican City blackout. And, you know, it's hard to see how those two would have been related if you just look at distance between these two cities, countries, places, regions. It just doesn't make sense. So, yeah, many rumors swirled around that there's something going on here. And as people spend the time trying to come up with theories and figure out what's going on that way, I'm the one always looking for the symbolism. I believe that everything that happens in the physical is a manifestation of what's going on in the spiritual realm with these battles of good and evil. And I always try to look for the symbolism. What does this mean? What is the Lord trying to tell us? I guess I am going a little bit out of order here because this post was from January 9th, but it was from Gab, and it says, we are getting resumes from senior level employees at big tech companies, hearing that many people are putting in their 2 weeks too. Internal civil war among staff and executives. Panic in Silicon Valley. The house of cards falls. The exodus has begun. And then there was this screenshot, the Great Purge. Forbes magazine threatens companies who may hire ex-Trump White House staffers. So this goes along with the screenshot before. We can just see this purge happening, or mass exodus, whatever you want to call it, where people just really aren't feeling that they have a place anymore in their industry, and they don't have a voice, they don't have a place. And so it reminds me of, when you think of the book of Exodus, you think of, you know, the children of Israel leaving that mass exodus through the desert and gathering together but escaping what's going on. And it's kind of symbolically what we're seeing happen right now. We're seeing people escape Babylon, in a sense, and kind of gather together, gather to where there is a place for them. And I just find that really interesting. Here was my pay attention number again, 144. And people were just pointing out the double standard with social media sites where, you know, they cite certain things as being violent from the right, but then the left can talk very violent about people on the right, and it's no problem. Well, there was that pay attention number, 144. Again, this double standard and censoring is creating this mass exodus that's causing people to gather. Maybe not physically in a location together, but definitely there is a gathering taking place all over the world. And boy, have I been seeing this number like crazy. I haven't even been taking screenshots of everything because I just don't have enough room and enough time to share everything. But even last night, I saw the number 144 within 60 seconds. I probably saw it 6 times within 60 seconds. I've never seen anything like that before. But here it was. I was posting a Valentine post on Instagram, and when I put in the hashtag Valentines, there was that number, 144. There is a gathering happening, and it's just all around. It's just so evident. The same day, my son texted me and my husband at the same time. He texted us from school, and he wrote, "I had a vision." Look at the time he sent it, 144. And I always say how I always see that number associated with my oldest child, with my son Gabe. And so, of course, we both write him back, "What do you mean you had a vision? Like you saw an angel?" And then he told us that his seminary teacher had asked all the students to text their parents in that moment and say, "I had a vision," just to see how their parents would respond, to give them an idea of what Joseph went through and how awesome his parents were. So I thought that was pretty funny. I was putting out my primary video, and as I was finishing up the editing, I stuck in the song, "I Will Be Valiant." That was the topic of my video, and there was that number, 144, and it's on there twice. This was on the track, on the MP3, and there it was again. And this video was all about the work. It was all about the marvelous work that God is doing, and then there was that number, the gathering. Now I have so many things saved on my phone. I don't remember if someone sent this to me or if I took the screenshot myself. It looks like I believe it was something I took myself. I know I watched Elder Gong's YouTube video, and I think when I looked at it, there was these numbers, 31, 31, 31, right in a row, and so that stood out to me. And so, yeah, still pondering that one, but definitely pay attention, especially when you see it 3 times. And then this infamous screenshot. Here's the post from President Russell M. Nelson that stirred up a lot of controversy. And there's that number, 113, pay attention. I got tagged on this. And the minute I saw it, there was that number, pay attention. And I knew there was more to this than meets the eye. And that's why I did. I paid attention. I prayed about it. I looked into it. I pondered it and made a huge chunk of today's video all about this. And third day power in this 11th hour, 3:11. In fact, there's something I want to add here real quick. I have since heard more comments, and unfortunately I've heard more members of the church saying things like they believe that President Nelson is just ignorant regarding what's going on, that he's somehow ignorant to what's going on in the world. He's ignorant to the secret combinations and the conspiring men. He's ignorant to plans of the enemy. He's ignorant to risks with the vaccine, and he's just ignorant to all of this. And that really saddened me and disappointed me that people are talking that way about our prophet. I don't believe that he's ignorant. I don't believe God is ignorant. I believe they just aren't seeing the bigger picture. I believe there's more to this than meets the eye, and you really have to rely on the Spirit. It requires the Spirit to see it from that perspective. These next few posts were shared with me. This is Kaylee McKinney. I always feel like I say her name wrong, but this was on the last day during the Trump administration. She wrote, "Blessed to have spent my last night in the West Wing with baby Blake." Now next to her is this drawer, and as you look at the signatures, you see the former press secretary signatures. So she signed her name as well, and look what she wrote. She wrote, this was on January 19th, 9/11. She left the scripture verse, Ecclesiastes 3:11. There it is, 3:11. Well, let's see what that verse reads. It says, "He hath made everything beautiful in his time. Also, he hath set the world in their heart, so that no man can find out the work that God maketh, from the beginning to the end. So to me, that scripture provides hope. It says that He makes everything beautiful in His time. We just have to be patient and trust what He's doing, trust His plan. Here's a screenshot from a private conversation with some friends. My friend wrote, "I was shocked when you mentioned that January 6, 2020 was the exact half-hour distance from April 6, 2000, when the seventh seal may have been opened with the dedication of the Palmyra Temple. I believe that it was." The scripture talks about the craziness all happening after about a half hour. So many things pointed to the half-hour ending December 14th. First, electoral counts cast, humanist comet passing by, solar eclipse, earthquake during the eclipse, halfway point between the two main eclipses, etc. So it's interesting to see both dates of the Electoral College vote that gave what I believe to be modern-day kingmen power. Both correlate with significant dates in the last days timeline, halfway between the eclipses and half hour of silence officially hit. So that was from two of my friends writing back and forth to each other, and then there was this, which is still a part of the same conversation, but I forgot to black out her name to protect her identity, so I'm just going to show a zoom in of the time when she sent this. There it is again, 1:44, and now I'm going to clip below her name and show you the text. She wrote, "That is interesting that you have felt impressed to go back to a healthier lifestyle. Myself and Lindsay have felt this as well at the last general conference. We felt like when they said to prepare physically, we needed to lose weight and get healthy. Lately, I felt impressed to use my beans and grains more. Totally agree about the stock cubes." On and on. Anyway, she was talking about food storage and getting healthy, and how we're all kind of having these similar promptings and these similar ideas. And there was that number 144, and again, it's just part of that gathering, this gathering of like-mindedness, and this gathering of people being on the same page, even though we live in different locations all over the country and all over the world. My friend and I here, we live on 2 different continents. And then someone shared this with me. It says, "Iowa House panel passes amendment declaring there's no right to kill babies in abortions." There was that number, 311, but also in the form of 33 and 111, which are 2 separate numbers that a lot of you, including myself, see all the time. So there it was, pay attention. And then there was this. Somebody sent this to me. You can see the side-by-side screenshots. This one says today at 3:11, so there's the pay attention number. And then today at 7:31. There's that number 31. I shared a screenshot earlier of Elder Gong with the number 31 or 13 all over that page. So here it is, and it says this is the White House press secretary doing a briefing. And as you can see, if you look at the likes and the dislikes, you see the screenshot on the left, the one that says 311, has 10,000 dislikes and only 1.8 thousand likes. And then a few hours later, that same day on that same post, suddenly there are only 3.1 thousand dislikes and 2.5 thousand likes. So they reduced the amount of dislikes by 7,000. And she said, wow, it's a good thing I took screenshots or people wouldn't have noticed that. Somebody went in and altered the dislikes so that it doesn't look so disapproving of America right now, so that doesn't reflect poorly on this administration. Someone shared this. This is from a website, magazine movement called Jacobin, which is America's left's leading voice. And I've never looked at this before or have ever heard of this group, but this is a magazine cover. And it's an image. It's really interesting if you want to pause the screen and zoom in and see what's going on. There's a lot going on, but you see Joe Biden in the center. He's depicted as the Messiah. And then you see the angels or the little cherubs or seraphim surrounding him. You see, looks like Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama. So those are the 3 above him. And then you see Dr. Fauci. You see the vaccine. You see... oh my goodness, you see, I think that's Nancy Pelosi kneeling down next to him. Might even be Mitch McConnell. I can't zoom in. My eyes aren't good enough. You see the 2 airplanes flying above. The birds next to Joe Biden's head represent Twitter. you look down and you see the press, the media, you see the people below wearing their masks, and they have their arms lifted like they're shouting for joy and worshiping what's happening above them. They're worshiping this heavenly host of angelic beings in the sky. So they're putting all these people on a heavenly pedestal above the citizens of the earth, above Americans. And it's just really interesting. There's way more detail going on if you want to zoom in, but that just goes to show you the perspective coming from the left right now and how they view this administration and everything that's going on right now in our country. Well, that reminded me of The Economist magazine, which I have not looked at for years. It's a magazine I've never read, but years ago I did a video about the covers that this magazine puts out every year, and how every year the cover is really interesting and just really makes you think. There's something trying to be said, right? So I went onto their website, and I'm going to show you a few of the images that I came across. But here's this. It says the future of e-commerce, and it has the Chinese dragon with a shopping cart checkout on his head. I just talked all about the dragon in China in my last video message, and here it says the future of e-commerce. Now this next screenshot is not from The Economist magazine. I'll get back to that in a minute, but I had seen this somewhere else, and it just stood out to me because there again is the dragon, or the leader of China, holding Biden. He's squeezing him, he's holding him up, and you can see he's swearing not on a Bible, but I'll let you read the titles of these books. And it's funny because he doesn't say I solemnly swear, he says we solemnly swear. And I think that depicts how many people feel what this administration really is and who's really running this country, especially with what's going on right now with the federal land and everything going on with the pipeline. It just really looks like the federal government's trying to take back more land. And when it's government-owned land, they have say over it. And if it's China that's really controlling our government right now, it would make sense that China would want more land. So just something to think about. All right, back to The Economist. Right now on my screen, it is 11:13 a.m. There's that number, 113. It says holiday double issue, and it has a picture of an astronaut, and it's talking all about Mars. And I can't see very well right now because it's such a tiny screenshot, but it's talking about a trip to Mars, a mission to Mars. Well, that same day, I came across this. It says, the race for Mars takes China and U.S. tensions into outer space. So it's always interesting when the media tries to pit China and the U.S. against each other when it feels like right now China actually is running the U.S. Then, while still investigating this magazine, I see this. China's Communist Party turns 100 this year. Expect mixed signals. Well, that is a big deal. It is the 100th year anniversary of the Communist Party in China. And, from past experience, we always see that huge, significant things happen on anniversaries. And then I saw this cover of Bloomberg Business Week. It says, there's a great future in batteries. Think about it. And so I brought this up to my husband and I said, are they trying to say that we're going to need batteries soon because there's not going to be any power? And he said, no, I think they're talking about, like electric cars and energy efficient, energy safe, green type of stuff. And I said, oh, but that still got my attention. But above that, there it is again, Mars. Who will get there next? What is this about this race to Mars, and why is it everywhere? Why is it something they really want us to know about and be concerned about? And of course, just to throw in a little bit of humor, I saw this meme and I had to share it. It says, when you're the first female vice president, but you can't claim it since your party doesn't recognize genders. And isn't that so true? I just had to put in a little laugh right there. And then someone shared this. God, I have no idea where you are taking me, but I trust you. Look at all those ones. That's absolutely the message of today's video. If we could just sum it all up with everything that's happened this month, I would say right there, I have no idea what you're doing with this, God. I have no idea what your plans are and how they're going to work, but I trust you. Okay, so this next screenshot, let me give you the background story. There was a day when someone sent me an article that had a lot going on in it, and I was just kind of skimming through it real quick. And down at the very bottom, it talked about something, it pointed out the fact that these three cities have something in common. It was London, the Vatican City, and Washington, D.C., how that they are all sovereign cities, meaning that they kind of have their own laws. It's like they're their own country or nation within a nation, and how there's this connection between those three, and kind of just went into this whole theory and whatnot. And I had never thought about that before or heard that before, so I was pondering about it, and I decided to do some research on Washington, D.C., and just learn some things that I thought was pretty interesting. So let me share with you what I learned. So apparently back in 1788, James Madison argued that the new federal government would need authority over a national capital to give them and provide them with safety and maintenance. And so they decided that this was what they were going to do. Everyone agreed upon having this national capital that was sovereign. And it was actually named after George Washington. So George Washington selected the location of where the national capital would be. So he chose along the Potomac River. And the district was named after Columbia, who is the female national personification of the United States. I did not know this. When I think of a female figure that represents the United States, to me it was always Lady Liberty, the Statue of Liberty, and I think that's how it's been for pretty much most of us. And so to learn that there was this other symbol before her that represented America, kind of like Uncle Sam, this was new to me. And so her name is Columbia. The name Columbia was a historical name connected to the Americas and the New World. People referred to it as Columbia. And that's connected to Christopher Columbus. So that's why in the United States there are a lot of things named after Columbia. You have the District of Columbia, you have Columbia University, you have the unofficial national vice president anthem called Hail Columbia, you have the ship Columbia, you have the Columbia River. It's funny how this is all throughout our culture, but I've never known this before. So apparently in the 19th century, Columbia was visualized as a goddess-like female. And she was compared to, I guess Britain has the same thing. Her name is Britannia, which is funny because there was a ship called the Britannia. So they kind of have the same thing in their culture. So their female persona was Britannia. She represents Britain. And there's also one for Italy and one for France. I was just learning all this stuff. I just had no idea. And so it makes sense now because as I realize in hindsight, I've seen these figures in early art and culture and cartoons from the early 19th and 20th century. So here she is depicted as an angel. She's kind of flying over the land, looking over everybody. And here she is representing more the indigenous people that lived here in the Americas. So you see her depicted lots of ways. They even said that at one time they depicted her as a Native American princess. Here she is wearing a warship on her head, bearing the words "World Power" as her Easter bonnet. That was pretty political, pretty interesting. And here she is as the logo for Columbia Pictures. How often have we seen this? And I had no idea. She's kind of depicted like the Statue of Liberty holding up a torch. I remember through the years as a kid seeing this on those old cartoons. I think I probably thought it was the Statue of Liberty. I had no idea it was Columbia. And then you have Columbia Records and even the country, the Republic of Colombia. Colombia is actually also rooted in Christopher Columbus. So all of this dates back or goes back and points back to Christopher Columbus. But interesting to know that we had this female sort of deity, as people viewed her, that symbolized our nation. So recently a friend of mine had been talking about how Hellenism had come up for her a lot. And that's like the Greek culture. We see a lot of that in Washington, D.C. And this was really interesting when I was doing research on Columbia. I came across this website where they talk more about her, and it says Columbine is a Hellenic revivalist bride of the Olympian prince Apollon. As a sovereign queen, she rules her court with grace, love, and iron. Immersed within the needs of her court and her father's territories, her only wish is to serve the gods, her people, and her beloved dead to their satisfaction. And it says, "For my lady, Columbia." Look at the date here. It was posted on November 11th, 2011. 11/11/11. And this was a website devoted to different gods and goddesses, and it was kind of strange, so I didn't spend a lot of time on there. But I thought that was interesting that she's referred to as a sovereign queen. So Washington, D.C. is a sovereign territory, and I had been seeing those dead crows or dead ravens everywhere, and I found that article about the queen that had died in the London Tower, and they referred to that bird as the queen. So I keep hearing the word queen and sovereignty, and then here on this image right here is a dove. We were just talking about that dove on Lady Gaga, which took place in Washington, D.C., and I'm just starting to see all these little patterns, things that are repeating, that are saying, pay attention, pay attention. So maybe I'll talk more about this in my next video, but something definitely is pulling my attention to Washington, D.C., and its sovereignty and power, queens, kingdoms falling, definitely something there. Now, I shared this in my primary Come Follow Me video, so for those of you who watch those videos, you'll hear this a second time, but I'm going to add a little bit more to the story that I didn't share in the primary video. So at the beginning of this year, a few weeks ago, it was a Sunday afternoon, and my sister texted me this picture right here. This is a picture I had been looking for years. I told my family, you know, I know there's this picture of me and Grandma, and she's wearing my sunglasses, and I'm wearing her glasses, and it's so cute. I can see it in my mind, but I've never been able to find it. And all these months have gone by, and my sister just randomly one Sunday afternoon texted me this picture, and she said, "Look, I found the picture. I happen to have it in my house." Here it is. And it made my day. It made me smile, and I looked at the picture and showed it to my kids, and just seconds after I saw this picture, I get an email on my phone from Family Search, and it has my grandma's name in it, and it said, "Would you like to hear the life story of Wanda Lundskog?" That's my grandma. And I thought, I'd love to hear her life story. I thought I already knew it, but that would be pretty cool. So I clicked on the email and started looking at pictures and things, and all of a sudden, the thought just came into my mind, your grandma has been passed away for a year now, which means you can take her name to the temple. And I thought, wait a minute, what? Thought about it in my mind for a moment, and I remembered her funeral was in January, a year ago. I couldn't remember the exact date that she passed away because she passed away in Tennessee. We didn't find out right away, and they cremated her, and we just had a little service for her like a week later here. So I couldn't remember the exact day she had passed away, but I did remember it was indeed in January. So I look at her details. I scroll up to look at her death date. Sure enough, the next day would make it 1 year since the day she had passed away. She had passed away on January 11th, and it was January 10th, the day that I was getting this email, the day that my sister had texted me this picture, and the thought had come into my mind, your grandma has been passed away for 1 year, so take her name to the temple. And I know that wasn't my own thought, and the thing you need to know why this was significant is my grandma left the church and had her name removed from the church. She removed herself, she joined another religion, and she always hated the church, and she had very bitter feelings about it. So it wasn't my first thought, you know, when it's been exactly a year, I'm going to take my grandma's name to the temple. But I had this prompting, this feeling that I needed to do this. So I was excited. So I click on her temple ordinances and I go to reserve them, and it won't let me. It won't even let me request them. So usually you can click on request, and if there's a problem, like it's missing information, you can click on something and it will tell you what it is you're missing, what the problem is, or you can request to open up a case. It'll let you click on something and it will it'll allow you to request permission, because I've had to do that before. But this time the fields wouldn't even let you click on them. I couldn't even click on requesting information or getting help. It wouldn't even let me click on it. And I thought, well, that is really strange. That is really interesting. If I'm supposed to do her work and reserve her ordinances, why is it so difficult? Why is it not allowing this? And I ended up going another way. I just went out of her record, and I went into the help part of the website, and I emailed the Family History Center and told them about my problem, and eventually I got an email letting me know that they were opening up a case, and once the case was going, they could look into it and tell me why it wasn't allowing me to request her name. But I got impatient and after a while I started to wonder, well, maybe this isn't supposed to happen. And then my third witness came right away. I was sending a text to someone, I was responding to a question, and I wrote, no, I haven't spent much time on the page, but I came across it one day. Wanda was interested. It was supposed to say, but I came across it one day and was interested, meaning I was interested. This had nothing to do with family history or anything. In fact, I hadn't even typed the word Wanda into my phone, into anything on my phone. So for it to just autocorrect the word and switch it to Wanda was really strange to me. My phone's never done that before. Wanda's a really unusual name, and for that just to autocorrect itself from the word and to Wanda really caught my attention, especially that sentence. But I came across it one day, Wanda was interested. And it's funny because before this, when I was getting frustrated, I thought, is she even really interested in the gospel? Is she interested in having her ordinances done? And here it was, confirmation. Wanda was interested. So I knew right away I needed to really look into this. So I called the church, I called a number on the website, and I got a hold of someone, and he went into this and looked for me, and even he couldn't figure it out. We spent a lot of time back and forth, and he couldn't figure this out. So told me just to be patient and wait to hear back on my original case. Well, that's what I did, and eventually I did hear back. I got an email, and it said that the reason she was stuck and I couldn't do anything further on her record or request her ordinances was because she had voluntarily removed her name from the church when she was alive. And I guess when that happens, it requires the approval of the first presidency of the church. So I asked for approval. They've gone ahead and submitted it. I had to actually have my mom write up a letter, and I had to prove that my mom is her daughter, and I had to show the connection. I had to show the family tree. And then my mom had to sign it, and we had to mail it off. So now we're waiting to hear back. But it's just interesting, the hoops that you have to go through, how things are much more difficult once you pass away to have your ordinance work done. If you've made choices like removing your name from the church, or I had this happen, I think I shared this in another video, how an old stepmom of mine who died in 1993 came to me in a dream and showed me that she wanted her work done. And because she had a lot of struggles in this life, she was addicted to alcohol, she had a lot of issues, and her family, her parents and relatives had left the church, and they had become very bitter. They had joined another religion, the same religion that my grandma joined when she became bitter and left the church. And they are very anti-Mormon. So I had to reach out to them for permission to do her work because she had come to me in a dream, and I explained this to them, and they just wouldn't have it. They are very bitter, would not allow it. As long as they were alive on this earth and it was on their watch, they would forbid it. So my stepmom, I believe, had been meeting with some missionaries before she died, and she was reading the Book of Mormon. She was starting to develop a testimony. I do remember that. And then things went south in her life, and she died, I believe, from a drug overdose or alcohol-induced, something like that. And it was really sad. And all these years, no one ever talked about the fact that she was investigating the gospel and looking into it. And I believe she still has those addictions and struggles probably on the other side. I'm sure she's been working on it. I'm sure things have been hard. When I saw her in my dream, she looked really sad. She was in this dark closet waiting to get out, and she just didn't seem like she was in a happy place. And so she may still have some struggles on the other side, but I think it's even more difficult when you can't get through to your own family that you want your work done, and especially if your family on the earth are not members, and especially even more if they're anti, how difficult it is for you to get those ordinances done that you really want so that you can move forward and progress. So I just thought it was interesting that I couldn't do that with my stepmom, but I may be able to with my own grandma, and how I got that impression, and I got that third witness, 3 witnesses that she wants her work done. And to me, that was a miracle, and I just had to share that with you. Now, speaking of family history, there's something I just wanted to share real quick. This is something I've been working on in my spare time, just to take my mind off of all the craziness going on in the world right now. This puts me in a happy place. And like I've said in this video, I'm trying to find more opportunities to go to happy places so that I can keep my spirits high and my hope high. And this is definitely something that has done that for me. This is really neat. This is what I've been working on. So I've gone through my tree, and I've only gone back about 4, maybe 5 generations at the most. So I haven't gone back too far, and I've just been pulling up all of the names in my tree, looking for their family crests. So I went through on all sides of my tree, and I put all the crests in, and all I did was do Google searches, so it wasn't anything I had to pay for. And I just pasted these family crests in my tree. And what I want to do is later, there's some websites I found before that talk about all the symbolism and heraldry. So it's like a list of all the different symbols and what they mean. So you can go through and look at the images and compare them to the family crests in your tree, and then write down what those symbols mean, which will help give you a better idea about the kind of people in your family tree and what they stood for, what they were known for. Then, in addition to that, I went ahead and wrote down all their surnames, and I also did a Google search. There's a couple websites out there that kept coming up that tell you a brief summary of the history of these surnames, where they originated from, what the people were known for. So I went and I pasted all of that in, and later when I have time, I'm going to go through and compare what I read here under their surnames with what it says about them through their symbols on their family crest. And I feel like it will just kind of take away some of that mystery. So I'm excited to do that. I spent my last Sunday just doing this, and then next Sunday I'm going to sit down and go through and figure this out. So I'm excited, because I feel like that's going to help me have even more love and gratitude and understanding for those who came before me, and for who I am today, and why I'm here right now, why I was blessed to be born into this family at this time, and why these exact people were chosen to go before me and open up the way. Just reading about their histories and their traits and spiritual strengths makes sense as to why we're all in the same family tree. These are the people who make up my spiritual army, my angels. And it's been so fun going into so many different ancestors that, quite honestly, I haven't paid a lot of attention to over the years. I always have my certain ones that I'm drawn to, and I spend the most time on those lines. But I found other people that I don't know a whole lot about, and I've gone in and clicked on the memories and read stories about them that I've never seen before. In fact, one of those stories I'll just share with you real quick. I read about through a line on my dad's side. They came over from Denmark. They settled down in Sandpeak County. The church had gathered up a group of boys from their area and asked them to make this journey, I think it was to the Green River, to help these saints who were stuck there cross that river and get safely into the valley. And so my ancestor was a part of this group of boys. And they went on this journey, and they got to the river, and they tried to help the saints cross it, but there was a struggle with all of the cattle. They had all of these cows or oxen that were too afraid to get into the water. And so they got a ferry, and they tried to ferry the animals and the people, and something spooked the animals, and they all went into the water, and it went crazy, and it knocked all these people into the water. And my ancestor was one of those people that got knocked into the water. And he shared in this story that in that moment when he was in the water, he looked up and he saw his mother, who had passed away a few years before. She passed away 10 days after she made it into the valley. And she had lost a child along the way. It had been really difficult. And he saw his mother on the water guiding him to safety. And she protected him and pulled his head up and got him away from the animals. And then she guided him over to this piece of wood that was floating in the water and helped him hang on to it, and then she left. He ended up being the only survivor of all the people that fell into the water. Everybody else was swept down the river and they drowned. And his mother was one of my great-great-great-grandmas that I knew nothing about. And just stories like that just give me such a sense of connection and pride in a good way, appreciation for those who came before me, for those who share the same family tree. It's things like that that help build my faith and help me stay positive during these times. So in conclusion, in summary of this message, so to end today's message, I just want to remind everyone that God's plan always includes turning bad circumstances into good outcomes. That's a part of His track record. There isn't anything so terrible, awful, and detrimental that He can't turn into a blessing, that He can't transform into our benefit and our good. And I want to give an example of that. I shared in my last video message that day, as I sat down to record, I had just received some terrible news. And I remember when I got that news, I thought my whole world was going to fall apart. I'll share with you a little bit. I got a phone call from my brother, and he told me some things that were really shocking. We learned that my dad's marriage of 13 years was now coming to an end. He had hope that maybe things could work out, but he didn't have a say or a choice in the matter. And so hearing all of this, all of the events that led up to this divorce, all of it that were completely unknown to me and all of my siblings, we just had no idea about any of this. It was all a complete shock. We weren't suspecting anything like this. And aside from all the shocking details, I'm just going to focus on the news of the divorce. But even that, even just the divorce itself, felt like a death. We were losing someone who we really loved, who we had had a great relationship with for 13 years. You know, my dad's wife had become a grandma to all of our children since they were little babies. They've always known her as a grandma. And we've had so many wonderful special memories with she and my dad together, and had future plans, and had just been there at Christmas time and had a wonderful time, and just this completely came out of left field. So basically within one day, my dad went from being happily retired, living in their dream home that they designed and built together. He built it brick by brick, board by board. He put in all the nails. He built that whole house by himself at his age. And they invested everything that they had, all of their hopes and dreams, into this house and into their life. We've always had wonderful, good experiences and wonderful memories visiting them and spending time with them. And within one day, he went from living that life, being retired and happily married, living in their dream home in a small town in the country surrounded by their family. It's where they grew up. To him now moving back to the city and being homeless and having to move in with my sister and not having a penny to his name. He'll be turning 70 this year, and he's having to now go back into the workforce and find a job. And it's been so difficult for him to do. Anyways, it rocked the whole family, and it was devastating, and we seriously treated it like a death. We went through all the stages of grief. And I know so many of my friends and family are also going through crazy trials right now. I have friends that are getting divorced. I have friends with aggressive forms of cancer. I have friends experiencing sudden death, experiencing the sudden death and loss of their children or their siblings or their parents, but it just seems to be happening all the time, these crazy trials and challenges that are just kind of coming upon everyone out of nowhere. And I decided one day, if God really is in control, if He's really in charge and has a plan, then surely He can turn all of this into good. And so I found for me that was the only way I could really cope, was to start looking for all the ways that these things could be used for good. Let me give you an example with my dad's divorce. It was so devastating. But as time went on, I started to see how my dad has become more active and involved in the lives of his children. My whole life, we've always had to share my dad with other families, and he's always been way more involved in the lives of the children of the other women that he's been with. And we felt pushed to the side so many times, but we just dealt with it. But now with this trial, with this challenge, we've been able to get to know my dad on a whole new level. He's finally opening up to us about everything in his life, all of his struggles and challenges and trials and things that we've never known before. He's living with my sister, and we're now seeing him more often, and he's becoming more a part of our children's lives, and that right there is the blessing in disguise. My dad's on this path of healing right now, and healing that some of us didn't know that he needed. And he never would have addressed those issues or sought that healing if he would have stayed perfectly comfortable where he was at. And clearly, the Lord needs to shake some of us up and get us out of our comfort zone to show us the errors of our ways, to show us improvements that we need to make before he returns. It's vital right now. And so that's what I feel like tribulations are for. These crazy trials and challenges are to shake us up, take us out of our comfort zone, and show us the areas in our lives where we need to improve ourselves. Sometimes we have to hit rock bottom in order to see that and in order to do something about it. This has also strengthened the relationships amongst our siblings. We've been talking more than we ever have before and working together, trying to help my dad. And you know, for my dad, it's very humbling. He's gone through a lot of humility over the past few weeks. And humility is never a bad thing, you guys. Trials bring us into humility, which brings us to our knees, which helps us submit to God, which helps us be obedient. Change can't happen unless those east winds come. When those east winds come and tear up our world around us, we see all the bad that's happening and we're scared, but in the end, that's when the change happens. That's when the good comes about. So with COVID and with the vaccines and with this inauguration and this new presidency and all of these things going on right now, I wrote in my notes, there's bound to be a lot of good coming from this. Maybe not in the way that we would have imagined, or not in any kind of a way that we can foresee right now, but I know that it will come. Tribulations and challenges and trials are also what unites us. And if we're building Zion, we need to be more united. It's been very humbling for conservatives with this new presidency. When things didn't go the way that everybody hoped that they would, so many were certain that Trump would be serving another term right now. And when that didn't happen, that crushed a lot of people's pride. It was very humbling, which is a good thing. Humility is never a bad thing. And you know, I can see it. Pride was overtaking a lot of people. I'm not talking about pride for their country, but I'm talking about pride for being right and proving everyone else wrong and putting all of their faith in the president of the country instead of the Lord. And I have to say that the events that have happened have really brought people to their knees and brought people to God, saying, God, why did this happen? What is your plan with all of this? And that's never a bad thing. We think we know how things are gonna go, and then God throws a curveball and says, nope. And I think everyone's been getting used to that now. We're starting to get used to things going the opposite of how we anticipate. And you still hear people saying, well, no, things are still gonna change and they're still gonna go this way, you just wait. But God's saying, trust in me, not in rumors, not in what other people are saying, but come to me and trust in me. But we think things are gonna go a certain way, and then they end up not going that way at all. And we think, how? Why? Well, let's get used to things not going our way or how we expected. This is just the beginning. You know, social media sites go away and we panic. People that we've been following get censored or removed and we panic. And we think, oh no, Now who do I follow? Now I don't know what's going on. We're all being censored and silenced, and everybody that I followed and got my news from is being taken down, and oh no, what am I gonna do? Now what? But remember, look for the blessing. Could it be that this is teaching us to quit tuning into men and start tuning into the Lord? Let me just say, the day of the inauguration, all of the people in my life who are liberals were super nice that day and have been more kind ever since. I went to the post office and there's a lady that works there who's a hardcore liberal. And over the past 4 years, people have had so many negative experiences with her, and they leave the post office yelling curse words, and there's so much fighting and contention with her. People are afraid of her. They don't enjoy going in when she's working there, and I've experienced her not being so kind to many of the customers. And I was standing in line that day with my son, and I whispered to him, oh, the mean lady's here, so let's just, get in and get out. And I walked in, and she really showed me. She was so nice. She was so kind and so patient and was just beaming and glowing with happiness and bent over backwards to do things for me that she normally wouldn't do, and was just like, oh, you have a wonderful day today. Just was so kind. And I could tell it's because she was happy about who had just become president. She had put all of her faith and hope into him, and now in her mind, things were finally going to start getting better. That was her hope. She was now feeling better, and therefore not in that spirit or in that place of fear. And I have to say, that was a blessing. There was someone else I encountered that day who I had an appointment with, who oftentimes seems a little frantic and stressed out. And this day when I encountered her, she was just so happy and so kind and said, oh, isn't today so wonderful? Now things are going to start finally getting better. And of course, I just smiled. But again, I thought, well, what a blessing to be around her when she's calm and happy and hopeful. And this just went on all throughout the day. People that I came across and encountered who I didn't realize over the last 4 years, their anger and hatred towards the man who was president was what was causing them to be so unkind and so stressed out and full of anxiety all the time. And just one simple change, just that one day, that inauguration, all of a sudden it was like, for them. And suddenly they're being kind to everyone. And I thought, well, in a way, that's a blessing. So there's an experience that I want to share with you. So the same day that all this was happening with these people that I know, let me just back up the story a little bit and tell you that, so over these last few months, I had noticed a friend of mine who lives on the East Coast and was a hardcore Biden supporter. I had noticed that she had been silent. She had not been on Facebook or social media since Election Day. And I found that very strange because my few friends that are more liberal, that are Democrats or Biden supporters, they're all very vocal about it. And they usually post things all day, every day. It's always there, right? You're just used to it. And they're usually very loud about their political opinions. And I remember Election Day, she posted this little celebration about how excited she was. It was the best day of her life, that he had won the election. And then I never heard from her again. And this is someone who usually posts every day and shares pictures of her kids and things that her family's doing. And this is a friend of mine that I knew back in high school. And honestly, I haven't seen her since. So I know her from years ago. So I wouldn't say that we're close by any means. She was a foreign exchange student from Germany, and she now lives again in the States with her husband and kids. Anyways, during this time, I started to worry about her, and I wondered what had happened. I felt like maybe something had happened. Maybe she'd been in a car accident, or she had passed away, or something had happened to her kids or her whole family, but it just didn't seem right. She hadn't been on Facebook since Election Day. So I remember the Spirit kept telling me, I kept having this feeling every day for several weeks, just reach out to her, write her a message and ask her if she's okay. But I kept thinking, no, I'm sure she's okay. Maybe she's just been really busy, or she's had some challenges in her life, but it just kept feeling like something's not right, something's not right. So instead of going about things the easy way, which is just listening to the Spirit and sending her a message like I was prompted to do, I decided to do things the hard way. And I started researching where she was from and the newspapers in her city and looking for news articles or obituaries or finding her husband on LinkedIn and seeing if there was any activity and looking for anything to give me some kind of hope or some kind of a sign that she was okay. And after hours and hours and days of doing this, it wasn't getting me anywhere. And finally one day I just said, oh, okay, I'm just gonna send her a message. So I reached out and I just sent her a simple heartfelt message, and I just said, hey, I really missed seeing your cute posts of you and your family on Facebook, and I'm just a little bit concerned. I'm hoping everything's okay. And I remember after a couple of weeks of not hearing from her, I found her husband on Facebook and I messaged him the same thing, and I never heard from him either. And weeks and weeks and weeks went by, and I thought, well, maybe something happened to their whole family. Maybe they were in a car accident and they died, or they got divorced, or something terrible that they don't want to talk about. So I just let it go. But every day it was still in the back of my mind that something just wasn't right. And my heart went out to her. Well, the day of inauguration, the day that all of these people in my life were being so kind and were so happy, she messaged me as well that day. She thanked me for reaching out to her, and she explained to me what happened. She said on election day, right after I wrote that post on Facebook where I celebrated that Joe Biden had won, the minute I hit send on that post, my phone rang. And it was my mom from Germany. And she told me that my dad had just suddenly and unexpectedly passed away. And she said, I went into shock. She dropped everything she was doing. They didn't even pack all their clothes or anything. And she and her kids jumped on an airplane and went right to Germany and haven't been back since. And that was since the first week of November. And she said, we're probably not coming back till the middle of February. But she said, it just turned my whole world upside down. It was just the worst news ever, and I'm still in shock right now. I still can't get on Facebook or even think about Facebook without reliving the shock of that day, of getting that news about my father. And she says, but I want you to know how much it means to me that you reached out to me. She said, you're the only person who has reached out to me and asked if I'm okay and how I'm doing. Not one person has reached out to me. And I remember thinking that. I remember every time I would go onto her timeline, I would hope that there would be a comment from somebody who knows her, who might give a clue or say, hey, are you okay? Or we haven't seen you in a while. Hope everything's okay. Or somebody would post something. Out of all of the friends that she has on Facebook, not one person reached out to her. I couldn't believe that. People that are supposed to be her friends and her community. And she must have thought, isn't it funny, someone I don't know very well, who's completely the opposite of me in so many ways, especially politically, who lives on the other side of the country, who I haven't seen since high school, reached out to me to ask how I was doing. And it just got me thinking, you know, our friends, the people that we know, they know that we're Latter-day Saints. And they see through our actions and how we treat them what it is we really stand for. And I just want to say that had I chose to be offended by her political posts, as I've seen so many people do, right? If I had chosen to be offended or give my 2 cents, you know, and contend back and forth, think of how different things would be when I got that prompting to reach out to her. You know, maybe I would have reached out and she wouldn't have wanted to respond. Or maybe I would have ignored that prompting and not want to reach out because my pride was in the way. But it just had me thinking, with all of these political tensions going on, it's so important that we put that all aside and just let it go. It's not important. Having to be right and bring about your own justice is a result of pride. It's so much more liberating and brings so much more freedom to just let it all go and not respond, and not feel like you have to fight and join in every battle. Just letting it all go. It's so much better. But in these times that we're in right now, people are looking for answers, they're looking for hope. A lot of people don't have God in their life. Government is their God. The people in power are their God. And that's what they're putting all their hope in, is these people in the White House to be their savior. And when things don't go as expected and the world continues to fall apart, they're going to start looking to people who have faith and have hope and have light, you and me. And if we've been a people of peace, they're going to feel comfortable coming to us and asking us questions. And we're going to be able to have that unity. But if we're in this place of political tension and feeling that we always have to pick a fight with someone or prove something right, then that's never going to happen. So my advice is to just take everything. Just live your life one day at a time. Focus on the day before you. Don't worry about the future. Don't worry about what might come or what might not come. Don't think about the past and how much you miss it or things that you regret, right? Focus on the day at hand. That's all we have control over is the present time. Focus on the day at hand and the things that you actually have control over. When I wake up in the morning, I think, what is it I need to get done today? And what are things that I can do today that will bring me joy? And what are things I can listen to today that are going to build me up? And I get through my day, I do all the things I need to do, and then when my head hits the pillow, I feel good. I feel peaceful, and I sleep good. And then I wake up and do it again. But if I'm going through the day worried about the weeks and months coming and wondering how things are going to turn out and what might happen and what might not happen and all the things that are so uncertain and up in the air and unknown, that brings about anxiety, causes tension in the home and in the family. Nothing good comes from that. So my advice to all of us is to just live one day at a time in the present. Focus on all the things that you have control over today. Focus on all the things that you still have today. Your family, your kids, the ability to go to the grocery store and buy groceries, electricity that still turns on in your house, water that still comes out of your sink, music and movies that you can listen to and watch, delicious dinners that you can enjoy with your family tonight. Focus on the little things and the good. Over the past few weeks, I can't tell you how many movies I've watched, more than usual. By the time we'd get to the weekend, I would think, oh, I just need a break. I just need to relax and unwind, and I just need my mind to go to a happy place. And so here's some movies that I have watched in the past few weeks that really have helped. That cute movie that came out years ago called Ever After. It's like a Cinderella kind of story, but I remember my husband and my son being like, oh no, we don't want to watch this. And they ended up loving it and laughing. There's a lot of funny parts in it. But it was so clean and funny and inspiring, and it just put me in such a good mood. I also had a couple of girls' days with my daughters, and one day we watched Little Women, which they had never seen before, and I've never read the books. And then on the other day, we watched The Little Princess. I'll have the links to these down below in my video description if you guys want to watch these movies too. But again, these are clean movies that were really inspiring and were just a nice, refreshing break from the world. There was even a movie called Penelope. I forgot all about that movie from years ago. It has the mom in it from Home Alone, and she plays the same character in this movie, a frantic mom who's looking for her missing child, and so that part was hilarious. There were a few things in that movie that were more of the world, but nonetheless, it was a cute movie that made you laugh. No, the afflictions may not ever go away. We can't expect to be whisked off into a safe house and be hidden there until the Lord returns. But our concerns and our worries can be swallowed up in the joy of Christ. I just want to end with this Neil A. Maxwell video that also popped up in my YouTube feed when I was doing dishes last week. And it was exactly what I needed to hear. And it's just so funny because other people were finding this video and sharing it all over Facebook. It's like all these things that kept popping up for me were also popping up for other people, and they were sharing them too. We were all getting the same message. Here's what he said. It was a talk he gave about enduring to the end. He said, stand still, hold your peace, and let the Lord fight your battles. And I believe that's what the Lord is doing right now. He's fighting our battles with unseen armies of angels. We have seen over the last couple of years the leaders of our church taking this peaceful approach, this position of peace, being peacemakers and peacekeepers. In other words, being like Jesus. And somebody pointed out that it's just like during the time of Christ's ministry on the earth. Everybody was expecting the Messiah to be this political leader that would free them from the oppression of the Romans. This is what they expected. This is what they were looking for. And so when they realized that Jesus, their hoped for Messiah, wasn't there to become a political figure or a ruler over the people, he was there to free the people from sin. So the people that had these expectations were let down and they rejected him. That's what happened with Judas. Could it be the same in our day, that we're looking to our leaders to free us from this political oppression and to become these fierce warriors for defending the gospel in the church? And so when we see them take this more passive, peaceful approach, because it doesn't match up to some people's expectations, they get turned off by that and it makes them angry. But it's no different than what the Savior did when he was here on the earth. He took a peaceful approach, but he said that when he returns again, it will be different. In fact, he did say in Matthew chapter 10 that he didn't come into the world the first time to really bring peace. He says here in verse 34, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's foes shall be they of his own household." So he's teaching us that his word actually brings division because there are people who are passionately for him and those who are passionately against him, oftentimes all living in the same household or family. So though Jesus was a peacemaker and a peacekeeper, and he has asked us to be the same, his gospel actually brings about division. That division of the wheat and the tares. And in Revelation chapter 19, John tells us about that great and dreadful day of the Lord when he returns. He says in verse 11, "And I saw heaven opened, and behold a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war." And the footnote for judge says Jesus Christ. "His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations. And he ruled them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God." And it goes on to talk about the beast, how the armies of the beast gather to battle against Jesus and his armies. I believe we are to be peacekeepers and peacemakers right now, and to save all of our energy for the great battle. When he returns again, it will be the great and dreadful day of the Lord. He will come to finish this battle. But in the meantime, he needs us to build Zion. And to do that, we have to be peacemakers and peacekeepers. Be filled with faith, hope, and charity, and be obedient. He's not looking for us to be fighters right now and have that fighting spirit. No, he's fighting the battle right now. But in the meantime, we've been asked to build Zion and gather Israel. So there's a word that's been coming up all week in different circles with different friends, and that word is soft. I keep hearing we need to be soft. We need to take a soft approach, which is the opposite of a fighting spirit, a spirit of resistance and battle, right? I truly believe that right now, the Lord needs us to take a soft approach. And I just want to end it with this. I was sitting in my car last week, pondering all of this, writing in my gratitude journal about the things that day that I was grateful for. And while I was writing in it, these songs kept coming on the radio. I was listening to The Message on satellite radio, and these songs kept coming on, and the titles of the songs stood out to me. And so I started to write down these titles. Every time the song would change, I would write it down, and it formed a message. Here's what I got. Scars surrounded. Say I won't. Fight my battles. Run to the Father. You've always been the way. the word of life, remind me you're here. And then here's the Father's response. Be patient. I'll find you. Stay strong. Amazing. Remember, I just had this feeling, write down the titles of the songs, write down these names, and just see what happens. And by the time my girls came out of the studio, the titles formed this message. Be patient, I'll find you, stay strong. It goes with what Elder Maxwell said. Stand still, hold your peace, and let the Lord fight your battles. And you know, with everything and everyone being silenced right now and taken down and turned off, with all of those voices removed, that is actually allowing us to be still. Anyways, I hope you guys found some peace in today's message. I really feel like this last week has been transforming for me personally, and I feel like I'm coming more and more into a better place. Every day it just gets better and better and better. And I know it can be that way for you too. The challenges and tribulations are inevitable. Those are things that we can't control. But let us focus on all the small things that we can control. Let's tune out all the noise, all the things that are loud and competing for our attention and trying to push fear upon us. Those things are not of the Lord. Let's not allow it in our life. Anyways, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time.